I'm live. How about that? I was just checking to see if I was live. I know I'm alive, but now I'm live on the stream. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cannabis Chat for Wednesday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of Cannabis Chat. Now, what do we do on Cannabis Chat? We chat about cannabis. You know, it's a weed talk show, if you will. Our chat rooms are open and people are standing by in our chat room to chat with you, the home viewer. We have a tremendous program today for you. I'm going to be interviewing 3 educators from the university world. And in fact, there's a movement afoot that may want to change Professor Weed Wednesdays to the Cannabis University Day. Just saying, which do you prefer, Professor Weed Wednesdays or Cannabis University? You can throw in whatever you think on our chat room and we'll take a look at it and we'll probably make some decision at some point. But right now, we are going to be talking with 3 educators on this program for probably about 30 minutes each, 25 to 30 minutes each. That's what we do. And these 3 educators, one is Brandon Canfield. He is the director of the Medicinal Plant Chemistry program at Northern Michigan University. And it is amazing to me that someone like moi would be talking to a professor of plant chemistry at a university. What can I tell you? It's a strange new world out there, right? Then, because we've discovered some friends at Oaksterdam University, we've got 2 people who teach at Oaksterdam University. That's out in the San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland area of California. And they are the oldest cannabis university in the country. I believe it was 2007 they started their program. And of course, there's online courses everywhere, certificate courses available everywhere. But you also have this university out in California. And we're going to be talking with Mitchell I think it's Colbert. Now, it could be Colbert, but I'm going to call him Colbert until he tells me it's Colbert. And anyway, he's a lobbyist, a freelance journalist. He's the former editor of Leaf Online, and he's also written hundreds of articles for all the biggest names in the cannabis publication universe, like High Times, Hemp Magazine, Green Flower Media, that's Max Simon's company, the Wine Industry Network, among many, many others. He's a researcher, and he is passionate about education, as we are. In fact, we devote this show every 2 hours on Wednesdays to educating you, the public, about this cannabis plant. And again, we refer to it indeed as a plant, not a drug. One of these days, everyone will accept it as a plant with medicinal values. That's where I think we might be heading, okay? And we'll get to some news headlines in just a minute. And then that final interview that we have is with Mickey Norris, and she too is an Oaksterdam University instructor, and she and Chris Conrad have been called the power couple of pot. And I guess they've been doing this for 30 years. They've been at the forefront of cannabis legalization. Yes, it's California. I think that's one of the coolest things that we're doing here on the East Coast. You know, I'm from the Boston area. We're connecting with the West Coast. We're connecting with Colorado. We're connecting with all the mature markets. Washington State, Bruce Barcott, the editor of Leafly Magazine and Leafly Online, all have appeared on this show. And this is the greatest way, I believe, for these new states, and I'm talking about not just Massachusetts and Maine, but also the newest legal states like South Dakota, like Arizona, like Michigan, right? All these are the new legal states. And we're up to 15 now in the United States, which is pretty amazing. 36 states now have medicinal programs, and all of those new entities into the cannabis space have spurred not only the stock market with all those cannabis stocks out there, but also there's a lot of movement among multi-state operators to get a foothold on these new markets that are opening up. And of course, on Fridays, we always talk about the business of cannabis with David Rabinovitz. We'll be doing that again on Friday. I believe we're actually focusing on infused beverages and the infused beverage boom in the cannabis space, and that will be on Friday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And now what I normally do is go over a few news items. And sure enough, there were a few news items today to talk about. And of course, we also do a Weed Talk News program every Thursday evening. Kirk Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net, and myself kick around about a half dozen to 10 stories in cannabis. We give our opinions about it. And we also hear from our staff reporters, our field reporters, our bureaus in New York with the Green Market Report with Deb Borchardt. In Washington, D.C., the Vote Pro podcast guys, Phil Adams represents them. He chimes in on what's going on in the D.C. area. And we also go north of the border to Solomon, Israel, from MJ Biz Daily International. He's been spending the last few weeks moving, and I believe Solomon is going to be back with us on Thursday. That would be tomorrow. Right. 2020 has been the longest freaking year in creation. Every day seems like a dog year of 7. I mean, it's like time has stood still, and we're just kind of going over and over and over again. It's Groundhog Day, call it whatever cliche you want. It's been a long time, and we've all had to go through challenges, and we're also sacrificing a lot of our socialization practices. In fact, I wish I could show you where I am right now, because it looks like I'm in my typical Pro Cannabis Media studio, and I am, but usually I have 2 helpers along, Dan French and Isabel Turner, but neither one of them are in the studio or in this building right now. So I'm sitting in an empty room with a camera on talking to you. And meanwhile, I know that Dan is out there because he has his finger on the live stream and the switching and all the stuff that we do. We'll roll in a few videos when we take some breaks. So it's pretty amazing what we're trying to do here. And I think so far so good. I haven't heard anything, and I do have my phone over there and I have my iPad over there just in case anything blows up. But let me give you a few news items. And there's one in particular that I've been keeping an eye on. And I think a lot of people are talking about this as well. As you know, we did elect a new president a few weeks ago, President-elect Joe Biden. And we also know that the current POTUS is digging his heels in, and he's showing exactly what it means to be a bad loser, okay? Because he just can't understand how he lost an election, even though he gained 70 million votes. Well, that's because President-elect Joe Biden got 5 million more votes. And he also won all those electoral states, just like we were all kind of shocked that Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump 4 years ago. Well, guess what? Donald's going through that same kind of shock period right now. And all I can tell you is we're counting days down to, I believe it's January 20th or January 18th. I'm not sure. And who's anybody going to tell me one way or another? I don't have anybody around me to tell me that yes or not. But it does look like the Democrats, when they take office, one of the first things they may do, one of the first things the president-elect may do when he becomes the actual president himself, is pick up the phone and call the Department of Justice and reschedule cannabis from Schedule 1. This has been part of the Controlled Substances Act since 1971. And moving it away from Schedule 1 will be a great gesture and can be done literally with one phone call. Steve D'Angelo from the Last Prisoner Project taught me that back in September when I met him and interviewed him at Cannex in September of 2019. It's an administrative classification. So the executive branch can make that call. It doesn't have to go through Congress just to reschedule it away from Schedule 1. Let's say they make it Schedule 2, okay? That puts it alongside cocaine and opioids and all those other drugs that are made in laboratories and what have you. And as we all know, this is a plant. I keep going back to that, but it has been classified as a drug at Schedule 1 for many, many years. And just that gesture alone will ease a lot of the industry's angst about what is going to happen next. And then, of course, we'll also know what happens with the Senate races in Georgia and whether or not the Democrats can at least get to the equal number on one side of the aisle and the other side of the aisle. And then I'm pretty sure that the Vice President, Kamala Harris, has the authority to break ties in the Senate. And this is how legalization or even federal decriminalization could happen in the first 60 days or even 6 months of the administration in power there. So I think that's very, very interesting. And it is something that I think that I'm not going to be surprised if that happens. And that's a good thing. Now, one other thing that I can talk to you about, a little news item. I think we talked about, I mentioned there are now 15 states that have legalized adult use of recreational cannabis. Now, that word recreational is something that a lot of people still aren't very comfortable with because we really are talking about a medicinal plant. But we all know responsible use by adults can be recreational as long as you don't overdo it or perhaps bite off more than you can chew of your edible, because most people who have experimented with edibles have had that one experience where perhaps they've bitten off a little more than they can chew, or at least they've had more than they should ingest anyway. And so we'll see what happens with all that. But I do think that Virginia is now looking to legalize adult use of recreational cannabis. And the Virginia governor announced that. Ralph Northam announced this week, it was on Monday that he announced this, that they want to move forward and introduce legalization legislation in that state. And again, it was Vermont that was the first state in our union to go through the legislative process to actually legalize adult use sales of cannabis. And now other states may try and do the exact same thing, and Virginia is next in line for that. So I know the guys from the Vote Pro podcast will have some insight on that on their regular show that they do, and we air or we live stream also on our network here as well. Let's see, I thought I had a few more news items. I do know that Central Massachusetts is becoming the cannabis capital of Massachusetts. And I'm talking about Worcester. Let's start with Worcester, the second largest city in New England. They have multiple dispensaries now. They have the state's only private lounge, the Summit Lounge, where you can go and partake indoors. Not quite sure we want to partake indoors these days just because of the COVID situation, but it is still possible, and it is a members only club, but easy to join as a member. That's at the Summit Lounge. But also, you're finding other towns in Central Mass have embraced the cannabis industry, have opened up the doors for growing, for retail operations. Uxbridge seems to be the leader in Central Mass when it comes to being a pro-cannabis community. That's where Caroline's Cannabis lives. And Caroline Frankel was she was the first social equity applicant to get a retail license in the state. I believe they've just recently expanded their space in Uxbridge. And they have received, get this is Uxbridge Town Manager, Stephen, I'm going to say it's SETI. They have received $400,000 from marijuana businesses in taxes. Okay. There are now 3 operational dispensaries in Uxbridge, which is right next to the tiny town of Mendon. So Mendon and Uxbridge are 2 of the most tiny towns in Massachusetts, and they're booming in the cannabis space. Maybe that's a lesson for other communities who are looking to perhaps take advantage of tax revenue and just haven't opened their doors to the cannabis community yet here in Massachusetts. And again, it was 4 years ago, 2016, when Question 4 passed in Massachusetts. It took 2 years for the medicinal program. The Department of Public Health in Massachusetts was running that starting in 2013 to create the Cannabis Control Commission, which took over all licensing of the cannabis industry. And by the way, where's the Cannabis Control Commission located? In Worcester, Massachusetts. So again, Central Mass dominating the growth of the emerging cannabis industry. Now, let's see what else we got here for news. I think I had more news items over here, but I'm not quite sure I'm going to recap those. I can tell you that we had a very interesting webinar produced by our friends at the Emerald Media Group. Pardon me while I get my stuff together. They actually had this really cool webinar on Tuesday of this week on social equity. And again, we will have that hour-long discussion about social equity in the queue of programs that we live stream as well. I did see an interesting item, and I'm going to ad-lib this one. And this has to do with Italy. Now, Italy's a great country, okay? I mean, is it my second favorite country? You could make that case. You absolutely could make that case. As we all know, great place to visit. Tourism is big. They have tremendous football, and I mean soccer, for those of you who don't understand that football in Europe is soccer. And they now are going to be marketing what they call Cannabis Light. Now, that basically means it's a low THC product, but I don't have any of the details on exactly what they're going to do with it. Now, this is the same country that wanted to make CBD, one of those many cannabidiols, chemicals in the cannabis plant. We're saying that CBD, they want to treat it as a narcotic, which is just crazy to me. But again, it's Italy. Who can figure it out? It's another country. I can't even figure out our own country. But that's Italy, and that'll be coming up. We'll have that news item, I am sure, on our Weed Talk News this week. If you didn't know this, Mexico over the weekend has voted, the Mexican Senate has voted to legalize adult use of cannabis in that country. That doesn't mean it's going into effect just yet, but that's the first big step towards acceptance and legalization and opening a legal cannabis for sale market in Mexico. And that means you've got Mexico, which is south of the United States, and you've got Canada, which is north of the United States. And both of those countries could have legal programs for sale of cannabis, certainly putting a little bit more pressure on the country in the middle, your US of A, to perhaps make some moves on that as well. And the timing is certainly right for that. Speaking of time, as I look at my clock, it is almost that magical time of 4:20. And this is the part of the program where I get to enlighten those of you out there who don't understand that 4:20 is cannabis code, if you will, for it's time to catch a buzz. Okay, that's just how it all worked out, because it started in 1971 with a bunch of high school kids from San Rafael, California, who used to meet at the Louis Pasteur statue across the street from the high school at 4:20 to catch a little buzz. Needless to say, law enforcement picked up on that regular activity and started embracing the 4:20 code as public consumption of cannabis going on outside the high school at the Louis Pasteur statue or on the corner of Main and Washington Street or wherever it was. It was this 4:20 going on. The cannabis community, of course, embraced this, have rallied around it. For years at cannabis conventions, they would make announcements that it's 4:20 on the trade floor, and usually that was a time for a break or even the end of the trade show, and it opened up a lot of the after convention parties and what have you. So 4:20, that's where the 4:20 code came from. It's celebrated on April 20th every year, and we celebrate it by playing a song that was special to me when I grew up in the 60s and 70s in New England. It's a song called Shanty by Jonathan Edwards. And every time we heard Shanty on the radio, we had that same feeling like, okay, Shanty's on the radio, must be time to catch a buzz. So this is one of our little favorite songs that we play. It's Jonathan Edwards. Take a listen. Hope you enjoy Shanty. We'll be back on the other side. We'll begin our interviews after that. Don't go away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car, I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
All right, welcome back to Cannabis Chat live for a Wednesday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And on Wednesdays, we really like to educate our audience about a number of different aspects of the cannabis industry. And in this particular case, we talk to people that are in the various universities around the United States who are teaching others about the cannabis plant, and that there's so many different aspects of that. And one of the ones that is most fascinating to me, because I really have zero chemistry knowledge at all in my life, okay? And it is plant chemistry. And joining us now on the phone is a professor from Northern Michigan University. His name is Brandon Cantfield, and you are the director of the medicinal plant chemistry program at Northern Michigan University. Thank you so much for joining us, Brandon. First of all, I appreciate it.
Yeah, hey, thank you very much for having me.
Now explain to me what the hell you teach.
Yeah, okay.
Because again, I've got plastic plants in the studio for a reason. I don't want to have the responsibility of taking a live seed and bringing it into flower like so many growers out there. And I don't even want to get into the fact that I can't tell the difference between a male plant and a female plant, nor did I even realize that there was one. So now that I've completely killed my credibility, explain to me what you guys are doing in chemistry when it comes to plants.
Yeah, well, so I'm an analytical chemist who's always been interested in plants, working with plants as a research focus. But so I helped design this program with my colleague, Dr. Leslie Putman, and she's a biochemist also working extensively with plants. And so, our program, it's in the chemistry department. We're both professors in the chemistry department. And we incorporate biology into the program. There's courses, plant kingdom, plant physiology. These are courses taught by the biology department. But the central focus of our program really is on, again, the chemistry of the plant, and with the focus on the analysis. So, we're interested in things like in cannabis and other medicinal plants. We're interested in, what compounds are being produced in the plants and at what concentrations, what factors influence the production of those said compounds, and throughout the development of the plant. How do the chemical profiles differ among various cultivars, and especially how do the compounds change upon extraction from the plant and in other processing.
See, I understood what you were talking about. Okay. I really do. I get all that part. What I'm fascinated about is now chemists or people that understand the seed world too, you can actually dictate the DNA of the plant. You can actually create a plant that might be skewing more CBD, have more cannabidiols that way, or THC the other way. Is that accurate?
So I think, yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of our students are definitely interested in, especially, non-GMO strategies for manipulating secondary metabolite production, be it the cannabinoids, the terpenes, any number of these compounds.
Now, one of the things I'm guessing, you've got aspiring young chemists in your classrooms, and we talk with the labs. And, when people ask, where should I invest in the cannabis industry is always a question we tend to get on this show, among other shows that we do. And it does seem like the labs are overwhelmed with the influx of stuff for them to test. I mean, they don't have enough chemists and scientists to hire. So I'm guessing that what you're teaching is you're teaching the future testers of cannabis in the future, because they're going to be hired. This is a good opportunity for young people to get involved with this now. Yes?
Yeah, that is the primary career path, that we're kind of imagining for most of our graduates. And not everyone wants to work in a lab. Some of them are involved. They understand that having that fundamental appreciation of the chemistry and the biology of this industry will help them to succeed in other aspects. But definitely the lab analyst position, I mean, that's where we've only graduated one class so far. But I think it was about 40% of those went straight out into lab analyst positions. It is the bottleneck right now of the industry, right? So
right. And there aren't that many testing labs in that space. So the expansion, and of course, I'm sure you followed the news. We had this election a few weeks ago, and sure enough, 4 more legal states come on board, but it takes time for those legal states to actually launch a regulated legal industry. And, labs, I believe it's only one lab is in the state of Maine right now, and they took them 4 years just to get open. There really does seem to be opportunities here for young people to get degrees with this kind of a background and then find themselves a job. You mentioned 40% placement. I'm going to tell you right now, the other 60% should send their resumes to MCR Labs and CDX here in Massachusetts.
Right. No, I believe that 40% was at graduation, that those people already had secured positions. I'm sure if we followed up now, that's much higher.
That's so. Let me ask you a question. As a professor, we kind of kidded about it at the beginning before we even came on. Now, I'm guessing this is, you got to work in a lab, or you have to have like hands-on to do some testing. How have you adapted to the hybrid model? And I don't even know if you have any in-class kids anymore, and mostly all this education is being done online. How have you adapted your teaching to that new normal, if you will?
Yeah, so, actually, as of this week, we officially have no more in-person classes now in Michigan. Up to this point, this semester, it's been rough. Just rough in the sense of having to adapt in a way that, our discipline just demands this hands-on experience, like you're saying. So we've been, personally, I've been Zooming all of my lectures. But the lab, I teach the instrumental analysis. We're doing, GC and HPLC analysis, and we still have been coming in. So it's, small groups. The students are all working on their own instrument, and we rotate between the instruments. But trying to maintain that 6-foot distance. Everybody's wearing masks. Of course, we're already all wearing goggles, and
Right.
but it's tough, like I'm going in tomorrow, one of the labs where we're analyzing THC and CBD content in some hemp samples we have. So the students have spent several weeks, working on their GC methods. They've built their calibration curves. They can't come in to do the final analysis. So I'll be in the lab tomorrow collecting that data for them, and, they can still write up their lab reports.
Well, so you actually have to hand them the information that they need to show you that they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I know at this point they know what they're doing. We've had a whole semester on here, right? But it can be frustrating to get this close to the end and not be able to complete the full process themselves. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing.
And as an educator, and I too, not only am I an educator, but I was someone who was learning challenged, I guess is the proper way to look at it. We didn't know what ADHD was in the 70s. So we just smoked weed and focused because that's what we did. What can I tell you? That's the way it worked back then. But everybody learns differently. And now you as a professor have had to adapt how you teach to everybody's individual learning challenges. I'm guessing, especially in chemistry, the hands-on is always the best way. Experiential learning, you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
So what do you? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, for what we're doing, I mean, that is the way. So, if next semester, we made it 14 weeks into our semester before we were officially shut down and moved online. Hopefully next semester, I don't know. I don't have hope that we will have quite that good of a record, but it's tough, and it's tough, like even us right here, I can see you have your camera on. I might have a class of 40 students I'm Zooming to, and there might be a couple cameras on. It's just a bunch of black boxes, right? And I miss that. Even in the absence of experiential learning, I miss reading the crowd, right? Seeing the faces. Can I move on? Do I need to spend more time on this topic? It's difficult.
Right. And I remember experiencing that very same thing. And I made everybody turn it on. He said, I'm not going to continue this class until I can see every one of you. And I don't care if you're in your pajamas or your hair is a bad hair day. I want to make sure I can see your faces. And I don't know, some of them did and some of them didn't. What are you going to do? Make them leave the room or something, right? I mean,
Right.
not much you can do. What are some of the things that now, as an educator, I'm guessing that you guys are still learning about this plant. Now, we all know that legally, the only place in America that it's legal and approved to do research on the cannabis plant is at the University of Mississippi. So, how are you guys introducing the actual plant into your classrooms?
Yeah, well, so with the 2018 Farm Bill, basically allowing hemp plants, that introduced that hemp pilot program, and Michigan took a somewhat progressive stance on that and allowed universities to go ahead and just do what they wanted to do. Um, we kind of had to run some things by internally with the administration, what was going to be happening on campus, but yeah, I mean, we've been growing hemp actively in our labs, in the greenhouse. I mean, I've had some growing in my fume hood just because it was a nice controlled place I could grow, and we've been doing that for a couple of years now. So it's working quite well. And the funny thing is, the analytical techniques we're teaching, usually the issue is you need to dilute the sample down because it's too concentrated with whatever you're measuring, the plant extract. So, the fact that the hemp has, maybe 0.1% or 0.01% THC, it's not a problem. We're still going through the same steps where we're finding it, we're quantifying it, and we're having that full experience.
Now, as you know, one of the issues that have come up since that farm bill, since we started getting into the legal hemp world, is all the different departments in Washington, D.C. are pointing fingers at each other, trying to figure out who's going to be most responsible for the hemp industry. And then of course there's that other side of it. Oh, but if it tests over 0.3% THC, then you on the DEA, you have to take care of that because now it goes into the drug category. I constantly preach that this is not a drug, it's a plant, and the plant has medicinal qualities to it. But we all know that the THC, which is the intoxicating chemical in the cannabis plant, has its own mind sometimes. So even though when you are growing a hemp plant that you test at 0.3%, when you extract the chemicals from it and put it out there as a CBD product with zero THC or under the legal limit of THC, there are still people out there that can test positive for THC in their blood work or in their drug testing. So again, what happens if you look at a hemp plant and it's 0.45% THC? You can't, that doesn't qualify, right?
Right. So for us, if that happens, when that happens, we have to destroy the plant, and that's it. And we make a note. Okay, we better avoid this strain for a while, or whatever treatment. If I mean, like we said before, some students have research projects where they're trying to boost production, and if that's an outcome, okay, we just learned something important. But we're going to have to not continue this project, or at least not using this particular strain. So, yeah.
So what is there a strain in specific that you can remember that you try to avoid when you're looking to qualify it as a hemp plant?
Well, I mean, so we've had some, that we've acquired some of the more high CBD strains that, I mean, they're just pushing that 0.3% edge, and it's easy to go over. So, we have a student, Devin Rash, who was doing this project, working with, I think, like Brandywine and various crosses of Brandywine.
Yep.
And those were right on the edge that we're not currently growing those in the lab anymore.
And I'm guessing you mentioned there are some that are high CBD strains. In fact, when I go to my medical dispensary, I'm always looking at either the 1-to-1 products or the 2-to-1 products. And then I found a tincture that actually had 10 parts CBD to 1 part THC. And I started taking that, and I wish I could tell you, it was a miracle cure. It wasn't. I have so much arthritis in my body. It will take an IV 24 hours a day, I think, to calm down the inflammation, or perhaps changing my diet. But we're not going to go there, okay? But I do partake with as much CBD in my system as possible, because I do believe in that entourage effect. I really do believe that the CBD really needs more than 0.3% THC to actually kick in, to actually live to its fullest, to have the biggest potential effect on a user. What's your feeling about the entourage effect?
So I'll tell you, in what I've read, I mean, there seems to be something to this entourage effect, and not just limited to the cannabinoids themselves. In terms of our program, I should definitely point out that, it's called medicinal plant chemistry. We really don't even get near the actual therapeutic effects or clinical trials of any kind. I mean, we're an undergraduate school, so that type of research, we have a lot of students interested in that. And so we're kind of a stepping point to their graduate studies where they might be able to pursue that. But no, man, we don't touch that. But yeah, the literature, seems
You
to.
can't officially touch that. I get
Right,
that, right?
Right,
Okay.
right, on campus.
Because we're talking about a college, okay? And I mean, let's face it, before we made the farm bill and before we started legalizing adult use, college was really a place where young people went to experiment with plant medicine, let's just say.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that most of our students have a lot more experience, with the plant itself than I do. So
That's great. Hey, good for you for admitting that. I think that's great. And I bet that actually builds credibility with your students too.
I mean, it's really cool. I've never had students this passionate before. Chemistry students aren't generally known for being super excited about the material. But in this program and in our classes, the students are passionate, and they're bringing their experiences, and it really is a shared learning experience as we're moving through this. So
now I'm not going to get into this, but it's one of the things that I railing about myself. I always throw stuff out there because my show, I wear the microphone, I get to say whatever the hell I want to say. I think it's ridiculous that it's 21 plus. Okay, I grew up at a time, a long time ago, when the drinking age was 18. I moved into Tufts University, where I went to school, on my 18th birthday. That was my first day freshman year. You talk about a gift, okay? Not only did I get the gift of tuition from my parents, okay, but I also got the gift of the fact that I could walk down to the liquor store on my first day freshman year and get a 6-pack of beer legally. Now, as far as cannabis goes, I'll admit, and I have many times, that I used it from age 14 on. So, again, I think it goes back to education. And one of my biggest frustrations is educating the lawmakers. The fact that we're making progress is awesome. But as an educator, have you ever been called in to explain how the plant works medicinally in front of a legislator, or has a congressman ever approached you or your other director about how does this work medicinally?
No.
Yeah, thank you very much for proving that point. I mean, it just boggles my mind. And now you're basically telling me that your students, I'm going to guess some of them are under 21. I understand it's a graduate program, and usually by the time. What's that?
It's undergraduate.
You're the undergraduate,
so,
right?
Yeah. So it's 18. They're coming in. Yeah.
And they know plenty about this plant, don't they?
They do.
Yeah. I had that discussion with my college class this year, and it was a mix of freshmen all the way to seniors. And I, facetiously said, and I'm sure no one in this room has ever experimented with cannabis, because after all, most of you are under 21. And that was one of the biggest laughs I got the whole semester. what are some of the things that you've learned, either from your students or just through your research, or perhaps a research study that has come out that you find fascinating? Because the word fascinating is always part of the conversation when it comes to cannabis.
Yeah, some of the recent research we've been doing, and especially I have a student who just graduated, Megan Bauer. We worked together on a project for a few years, and we were looking a lot at the sort of the kinetics of the decarboxylation reaction of both THCA and CBDA. Um, and I think one of the more surprising things was looking beyond that at the stability of THC and CBD themselves. And it's actually not all that well understood. Even, simple things like half-life. I mean, we all know there's going to be some degradation in quality of a product over time, flower or an extract or something. But the actual conditions driving those rates of decomposition and the popular notion is that the THC will turn into CBN, but there's a lot of stuff in between there that we don't really have a good handle on. That there's a lot more to learn, and yet this is one tiny little bit of the whole thing, right? And even here, there's so much more to learn. So,
and as we progress as a society, and as laws are being questioned or changed at the ballot box, and the democratic process begins, and all this, one of the things that I see in the future is not just the opening of the banks and the ability to talk openly about this plant and its benefits for wellness, but also the research that needs to be done. And here you are, right in the middle of it. I'm guessing that you're dying to get a federal grant so that you can study this even more.
This, allowing the hemp plants was a huge step forward for us, and I feel like there's more steps coming around the corner when we can be working with the higher concentration plants. But yeah, it's an exciting time, and different people are into different things, but I mean, I dig this, even this, looking at one little reaction and what's impacting it, what's influencing it. It's exciting times. It's things that, clearly, just looking at the genetics of the plants that are around right now, clearly there have been talented, educated scientists working underground with this stuff for a long time, right? But the fact that we can come out now and publish and hopefully apply for more grants to get that kind of funding to do more, it really is an exciting time to be involved in the research of cannabis.
Yeah. And again, what does that lead to? It leads to more jobs. And again, I get to go up on my pulpit a little bit here and preach a little bit that for some reason, those that have been elected as senators in our country can't quite understand why those COVID relief bills have the word cannabis in it on a somewhat regular basis. And they count and they say, why is there more mentions of cannabis than jobs in this COVID relief bill? When what I just can't understand, that word should be synonymous with jobs. The cannabis industry already employs more people than coal workers or miners. And all they're going to do is it's only going to double in size because it just keeps growing anyway. So I just, again, very frustrating trying to watch what happens in our federal government on a somewhat regular basis, no matter if it was the last 4 years or even the 8 years before that. So, I try to throw all politicians under the bus. I don't care what party they're under. And what you mentioned THCA and CBDA. Now, I've heard what the differences are, but I never get tired of listening to others explain what those differences are between those two chemicals, those two cannabinoids. Can you explain in simple terms for those of us who really are clueless when it comes to chemistry, what is the difference between THC and THCA?
Yeah, I mean, they're big complex molecules, right? I mean, you can kind of see wherever, I don't know if you can see up there. I don't even know if I'm on the screen or if this is just
you are on the screen. I'm looking at you. Yep, you're there.
Very good. So anyway, I mean, THC, CBD, those are moderately complex molecules, right? So without getting into too much of the structure, they're pretty similar between the two of them. And the difference between the acid form with the A or the neutral form without the A, it just has a what we call a carboxylic acid functional group. But basically what happens is that's what's synthesized in the plant, in the native form, is the THCA or the CBDA or the CBGA or any number of these acid form cannabinoids. And as they decompose spontaneously, but dependent on certain conditions, temperature being a major factor, they release that in the form of carbon dioxide. So the same, essentially the same product from your vinegar, baking soda, classic reaction, the bubbles forming. People talk about trying to decarb their own product in the oven at home and watching for those bubbles to come out and trying to time that just right. That's CO2 gas, same thing we're breathing out. Same thing in our sodas. That's what's coming off of those. And after that leaves, you have something that's more, more active, I guess, in our bodies.
Potent.
More potent,
Yeah.
sure.
Yep. Yep. It's interesting. So, and I love that word decarboxylation. I got to say it 5,000 times to make sure I say it right, but I've said it a few times now to do it. I want to get back to hemp for a second, because the uses of hemp go far beyond just extracting CBD from it. I'm certainly well versed enough to know that you can build stuff with hemp. You can create hempcrete instead of concrete, and the hemp plant does have a quality that cleans the air, does it not?
So I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Most plants, if we think about the biomass that's
Right.
generated, it's growing so quickly that you have a lot of conversion or sucking in of the CO2, converting that to the biomass. Yeah, but all kinds of polymers being made out of hemp now, different products. We had someone pitching some kind of dashboard components for an automobile, like something in the dashboard. I'm not sure what it was, but something made out of hemp seemed kind of interesting. Yeah,
And clothes, and of course clothes too.
clothes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really was the hemp plant that caught the ire of Hearst and DuPont, who were the guys that funded Reefer Madness and drove and created that whole drug, the DEA, back in 1937, which started prohibition, because they were fearful they were in the forestry world and they were fearful of hemp competing. So they decided to not only nix hemp in the bud, but also get rid of that evil weed too that they called marijuana back in the day. I'm the history major, I'm not the chemistry major. All right. So Brandon, let me ask you one more question about the future of study of this plant. Where would you, if I gave you the $1 million grant to study this plant, where would you want to dive in yourself as a true chemist that looks at this plant and is fascinated with the different makeup of it? Where would you like to see some of the research go?
Well, coming back again, I'm a chemist, so I think there are probably many more interesting compounds in this plant that haven't even been identified yet.
Right.
And some of those, are they bioactive? Does it relate to this entourage effect where, by themselves they're not, and maybe that's why they've been overlooked, or they're just at such low concentration, but they can be active even at that low concentration. So, that's kind of where we're turning some of our focus to, is just let's keep breaking it down further and further and separating the components out and seeing what we can find.
Yeah. And it's again, it's a never-ending process because there's still so much to learn about this plant and how the different terpenes, we didn't even get into terpenes, and how the different terpenes that can be extracted and dictate the steering mechanism of the THC and the CBD and some of the other cannabinoids that are in this plant. Fascinating stuff, man. And Brandon, I really appreciate you taking the time and enlightening this dumb jock myself on what goes on in the plant chemistry program at Northern Michigan University.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.
All right. And thank you and good luck the rest of the semester.
All right. Thank you.
There you go. There goes our first guest, Brandon Canfield, the director of the Medicinal Plant Chemistry Program at Northern Michigan University. And this is Cannabis Chat. And in just a little while, we're going to be talking to our next instructor. His name is Mitchell, and I think it's Colbert. Now, I'm going to find out. I'm saying Colbert because it has the same spelling as Stephen Colbert, but I'm going to probably screw it up. But we'll find out after we take a break and have more of Cannabis Chat after this. As a sportscaster on TV and radio for 25 years, people always thought I was an expert on sports. They used to come up to me at bars and go, "Hey, sports guy, are the Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup or what?" I didn't know then, and I don't know now. Just because I reported on sports, talked intelligently about my love for sports, I was not an expert. I was a talk show host, an anchor, a reporter. Sure enough, the same is true in the cannabis industry. Now, even though it's been around for thousands of years, research is just beginning. The difference, of course, is that there are no real experts in the cannabis space. However, we all believe that we're experts in our own field. For instance, we at Pro Cannabis Media have 75 years of combined experience in commercial media, buying, production, and strategic market planning. Now, we want to help you control your message. After all, you're probably considered an expert in your field, whether that's lighting or containers, law, interior design, or even security systems. We already have an expert in the insurance business for MRBs, that's marijuana-related businesses. Bill Perrier from Charles River Insurance is our expert. He's a member of our PCM Gold Club of experts, and he explains that one of the largest insurers in the world is now writing insurance for cannabis farmers.
Lloyd's of London, 325 years old, the standard bearer in the market, is with a company called Chesterfield Brokers that have launched this parametric insurance for crops.
Insurance is all about timing, and it's a shame we couldn't have got these programs up for the farmers and the other cannabis growers who've been really affected by those West Coast fires.
We also have an accountant for the cannabis space. He's a CPA, Rick Leneve of Accounting Buds, and we rely on both of them for their expertise, and we showcase their expertise in our news and talk shows. In fact, we'll put them inside our original content, and we can talk to them. It's kind of like product placement. So show off your knowledge inside our content as we position your expertise in your field. And you do that by joining our Cannabis Gold Club of Experts. That's where you get a chance to show our audience your expertise in your field. This group of entrepreneurs will serve as a referral network in order to generate leads for your business and, of course, build your expertise because it'll be shared during our weekly news and talk shows. So if you want to take advantage of our following and the original content we produce on a weekly basis, contact me, Jimmy Young, or our sales team today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Mark and the Green Nurse Podcast. We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the network.
are Pro Cannabis Media.
Wednesday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Of course, we're located just outside of the Boston, Massachusetts area, and we love to go coast to coast. And that's where we're heading now, out to, well, I believe he's in California. It's Mitchell Colbert. Yes, Mitchell?
You got it. And where are you at? Near Worcester? What area?
No, we're in Boston, and it's Worcester,
Okay.
by the way, not Worcester.
Okay.
Worcester,
Sorry.
Worcester, that's okay. Worcester is a school or a town in Ohio. Worcester, and Worcester is spelled Worcester. Anyway,
Yeah.
Mitchell, nice to meet you, sir.
Pleasure to meet you.
And you have quite the resume. Have you been out in California for a long time?
Yeah, born in San Francisco, raised in and around the Bay Area my whole life.
I got to tell you, I visited a few times. I've been to the Bay Area. I was a sportscaster for 25 years. I broadcast for the Rose
awesome.
Bowl. I got to broadcasting for the Rose Bowl is one of the coolest things I've ever been able to do. Let's just say. Now, granted, it was soccer, not American football, but I didn't mind,
Yeah.
And
I'm a soccer fan, so no complaints here.
Okay, there you go. That's great. Well, again, another thing about California, you guys are always a very socially progressive state. I think, right? And I've always admired that about California as well. So what we do here is we like to talk to instructors, people that have something to teach others about this cannabis plant. And, you've been a journalist, you were the editor of Leaf Online, you're a lobbyist, you founded Full Spectrum Strategy. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because to me, that's kind of fascinating, and how using this plant, how it can actually impact positively on the environment. That's one of the things you're passionate about, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a longtime environmentalist growing up in California and the Bay Area. There's a lot of tree huggers out here. Like, I lived in Santa Cruz for a while during a time period where people at University of Santa Cruz were living in trees to keep them from being cut down. I've never camped in a tree myself, but I support what they're doing. I'm all about keeping our environment pristine and natural. And that's one of the things that really has drawn me to the regulated cannabis industry. I've always been involved in the traditional cannabis market. I've been a buyer, been a consumer for years, then, became a medical consumer when I got my medical card, and now an adult use consumer. But one of the things that really draws me to the regulated market over the unregulated market is, you're getting a product that's not just quality controlled and safe for you, but it's also safe for the environment. It wasn't grown in some clandestine way where they clear cut a forest and they're polluting a river and threatening endangered species. It was done in a proper fashion. So that's a big draw to the regulated market. So just quick background on me and kind of bringing it up to where we are now. I worked for the Prop 19 campaign in 2010 as a regional director. I've worked for a couple other statewide campaigns to legalize cannabis. Indirectly for this last one, I was working with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, which is now known as Law Enforcement Action Partnership. They're a group of retired and current members of law enforcement who think the war on drugs is bogus and that police have bigger issues that aren't busting people for drugs. So I was working with LEAP back in 2016, trying to get speakers out to events to talk about their message. I wasn't working for the campaign in any capacity, but as you'd imagine, those cops kind of help people come around the idea of legalization. So I've worked for a lot of different nonprofits. In addition to LEAP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, it's kind of where I cut my teeth when I was still in college. After graduation, I worked at Harborside Health Center, now Harborside, one of the biggest names in the industry, publicly traded at this point. From Harborside, I went on to work at Pistol and Stigma. It's a small female-led consultancy based out of Reno. Really great girls there. They were winning licenses across the country in some of the most restrictive states, so really appreciated my time there. But my heart was really in lobbying. I always wanted to be a cannabis lobbyist, so when the opportunity arose to work with a vape company to advocate for recyclability, it really caught my attention. So a lot of people don't realize this, but state regulations actually prevent the recycling of cannabis waste in many states. They made them so strict you can't even recycle.
Explain what cannabis waste is.
Yeah, so it takes a lot of different forms. Like there's the over packaging of the product itself, the exit bag some states require, the multiple layers of childproof packaging, and also in the case of some products, the glass jar your bud comes in, the vape cartridge that your oil comes in for that vape pen. And, I was curious, what is the disparity between the weight of the product and the weight of the packaging in some cases? So I started weighing a bunch of different types of packaging that I had in my house. And what I found was in some cases, you have 40 times as much packaging as you do product. Like that'd be like a Starbucks would serve you coffee in a coffee cup made of lead. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
So there's just so much waste.
One of the things that, and I'm 100% supportive of everything you're doing in Massachusetts, we've voted it in adult use
Mhm.
legalization 4 years ago. The medical program's been going since 2013. I picked up my card very quickly because all I had to do was show my arthritic hands to the doctor. And you
Mhm.
mentioned all that childproof packaging. And I've talked with container people like Nick
Mhm.
Kavasovich from Kushko. It's challenging to
It
open up
is.
some of these containers if you have arthritic hands, which is why you qualify for the darn stuff anyway. So
Yep.
there's got to be there's definitely room for improvement in that
Absolutely.
too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a young guy, as you can see, but I have some physical things going on. Broke my dominant hand wrist a few years ago, and it has never come back the way I would have liked. And sometimes when I am opening a sticky jar of hash, as we know, cannabis hash is very sticky. If it gets up in the tread and stuff, getting some of those childproof containers open becomes almost impossible by the end of that gram of hash.
Right.
So it's a real issue for consumers because you're paying money for product you now can't use.
That's right. And have you ever gotten any of that concentrate on your fingers and then licked it?
Oh yeah, or if you have like a hot tea or coffee, you can melt it off in your drink. That's another way to do it.
Right. But I got so wasted.
Yeah,
I mean, it was not a pleasant experience, and it
for
will be
sure.
and it will be something I won't be doing again. It's kind of like
Yep.
touching that hot stove when you're a kid. You learn the hard way, right? Um,
Yeah.
one of the things in Massachusetts that I do rail about,
Mhm.
and I think you'll like this. There's only one solar powered dispensary grow
Hmm.
facility in the state of Massachusetts, and I would think that with this kind of product that really depends on growth of a
Mhm.
plant that's alive, you want as much exposure to sun as possible, including perhaps powering the lamps that are inside that are growing. So I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and say I wish all dispensaries had solar power, but there should be some kind of more or even
Mhm.
more economic incentives for new dispensaries to go solar. Are you seeing any of that in California?
Yeah, so we actually have it written in to our
See?
regulations. As I recall right, there are sustainability requirements that go into effect in 2023. I
Right,
don't know like what percent of total energy use is required.
right,
So I actually, over the past year, worked with a team of nearly 3 dozen experts working for the National Cannabis Industry Association on a white paper focused on making the industry more sustainable. This white paper just came out a couple days ago. So if people are interested in seeing that, go to the homepage for the National Cannabis Industry Association. You're going to see a section at the top that's scrolling through 4 different things. One of them is going to be an announcement about that white paper. Go to that page, enter your info. You'll be able to download your own copy. And it's a blueprint for the whole industry to be more sustainable. And I mean, the NCAA was originally hoping for like a 40-page, neat, clean white paper. Our original draft is over 100 pages. I mean, there is so much to say. It's not the draft you're going to get is not 100 pages. There is a lot of editing done, and even though it's not as long as it used to be, all the content's still there. I mean, it is such an information dense document. Highly recommend anyone read it. I mean, really, it's mandatory if you own a business, but if you're just interested, it's worth a read.
yeah. And Morgan Fox, I'm the communications director of the
Oh yeah,
NCIA.
he's great.
He is great. He's a regular. I wanted to say he's a regular because he's been on
Mhm.
with us a half a dozen times. And you mentioned Harborside. I'm guessing you know the D'Angelo's pretty
Oh
well
yeah,
too.
yeah. Honestly, best boss I ever had.
Oh,
I've
that's
worked
nice.
a lot of different retail jobs, worked all over. I mean, I loved working for Pistol and Stigma as well, but Steve was such a chill boss. I really appreciate the work he's doing now with the Last Prisoner Project as well.
Right.
Getting people out of prison. It is one of the most important things we can be doing now. Get them out of
That's
prison
right.
and into the industry they help create.
That's right. In fact, I think I saw something today that the oldest inmate, 91, I think, has now been
Mhm.
released. I mean,
Oh,
he was in,
wow.
and again, it's kind of sad. It didn't have anything to do with expungement or reform. It had to do with the fact that they were afraid he was going to catch COVID, and then was released because of that. He,
Yeah.
spent something
But,
like
I'll
40.
take any win.
Right.
Anyone getting released, that's a win.
That's right. And it was Steve D'Angelo. And I'm pretty sure I've already quoted him once today on this show. And very
Mhm.
rarely, we always end up saying something about the Last Prison Project and Steve. And
Mhm.
it was when I interviewed him at Cannex in Jamaica in September of 2019, he explained to me that it will just take a phone call from the executive branch to the Department of Justice to deschedule from Schedule 1, a
Mhm.
phone call.
Mhm.
Now, of course, being a Massachusetts person, I was fearful that the current POTUS would have used
Mhm.
that to keep him in office. Thankfully, he did not. And thankfully, the President-elect Joe Biden is waiting for his turn to actually take over. And that Democratic
Mhm.
platform at least has come out and said, we want to decriminalize cannabis.
Yeah.
You're a lobbyist, right?
Mhm.
You're talking with, I'm guessing, policymakers,
Mhm.
lawmakers. How
Yep.
challenging is it? And in California, I'm guessing it's a lot easier than it would be, let's just say, in the middle of the country.
Yeah. Well, actually, before I forget, on the last topic, still, another great group out there is the Weldon Project, ran by
Yep.
Weldon Angelos, former, cannabis prisoner himself. Really appreciate what Weldon's doing as well. And I'd be amiss to not mention Weldon after talking about the Last Prisoner Project, because they're both doing amazing work in that space. In
Yep.
terms of lawmaker interactions, it's funny. So I've done work in both Colorado and California, and out of the two states, Colorado, more the middle of the country, has actually made a lot more progress on this than California. So I spent the last 2 years founding my lobbying firm, Full Spectrum Strategy. My main client was Firefly Vapor, which is now part of Slang Worldwide, a major vape company. And Firefly is a reusable vape product. You put hash in it, you put bud in it, use it on the go. It's great. Love my Firefly 2. But they wanted to release a vape cartridge type product. Their whole marketing, though, is based around the idea of phenomenal flavor, zero waste. You can't claim to be zero waste if you have a disposable product. And the issue they saw was that many states wouldn't allow them to recycle it. So that's where I came in. And sorry, did you have a question come up there? I saw that.
No, but I have just been enlightened to the disposable vape cartridge, and I find them very convenient.
Oh,
However,
absolutely.
now that I'm hearing you say, I don't want to use them if I'm causing trouble, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing with it, like what used to be people smoking bud that could have been grown in your buddy's backyard, it's now bud that's grown in a centralized location somewhere that is shipped to a processing facility that is shipped somewhere else. All along the way, every link in the chain is adding more environmental pollution. Then you get a cartridge shipped all the way around the world from China, made
Right.
out of, in many cases, heavy metals, rare earth minerals, things
Right.
that are mined out of the earth. There's a whole supply chain now just for the weed to be put into that wasn't there before. So there's a lot more environmental considerations when it comes to more processed products. Like if you're really trying to be environmentally conscious, probably the best types of products you could use are the most old school ones: bud, hash, edibles, the things people have been making for years that don't require a huge amount of packaging. But realistically, anything in the legal market is going to be really overpackaged right now because of how state regulations are set up in many places.
And, and of course, a lot of states, now Massachusetts, again, allows 6 plants to be grown at home per adult. And if you have a dwelling of 2 adults, you can have as many as 12 plants grown. But as an adult who is afraid of growing, that's a lot of responsibility. I know it's an investment, and I like my plastic plants. You know what I mean? They never die.
I mean, I feel the same way. The one time I ever tried to grow from a seed, I didn't end well. So I was just like, all right, I'm going to cut my losses. Growing's not for me. I'm just going to leave it to the experts and buy what they have.
Right.
So I totally understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's certainly easier to go to a store and drop, or not even that anymore. Go online and pick your product, and then show up and walk away with it. The whole
Absolutely.
COVID thing has really changed the delivery process
It has.
and the distribution. And it's a lesson, I believe, that the industry is learning. In the beginning, dispensaries were designed to come in and hang out and get educated, and right, the interiors were really nice.
Absolutely.
But now it's like, we don't need the interior, we just need to order it, show up at the door, and leave, especially if you've educated yourself enough to know which strains you like, how you like to intake the product, whether it's old school by rolling up a joint. But I do want to come back to the vaping thing, because we had that controversy with the illegal market putting vitamin E and cutting it there. That's one of the reasons why I've always trusted my medical dispensary products. They're tested and they are inspected.
So that's actually why my friend who worked at Firefly thought of me. He knew that as a journalist, I've been researching the vape market for over half a decade. So I was working at Harborside. My first 6 months on the job, vape pens did not exist yet. They were not in this market. I'd never seen one before. No one had ever heard of one. Then we got the first vape pens. Horrible failure rate. They were leaking all over the place. And after seeing them for a while, I started thinking, okay, this is totally new. What could the potential human health impacts be? What are the risks? And what are the environmental implications? And that's what I've been researching for years. The environmental research led me into my lobbying, and the human health. I've done a lot of articles for Cannabis Now for different outlets, and I think the first one probably ran 3, maybe 4 years ago now. I was writing about a lawsuit between 2 vape companies, where one vape company was accusing the other one of selling poison, if I recall the quote right, because they used MCT oil. So the allegation is MCT oil can lead to a condition known as lipid pneumonia, which is a pneumonic-like symptoms where oil lipids build up in the lungs. I first came onto this researching dabbing. When I first came across dabbing, someone told me an anecdote about a gentleman named Magweedo, Magweedo, who actually collapsed a lung at a high times cup after taking a huge dab. Supposedly, what the doctor said was something like the oil buildup in his lung caused that to happen. That got me researching something known as paraffin pneumonia, now known as lipid pneumonia. So I've been researching this for years, really concerned about this possibility for years. So it really doesn't surprise me that the EVALI epidemic happened. I am surprised that it was vitamin E acetate. I had never heard of that being in vapes before that, ever. I mean, in all my research of the legal market, nobody is using that at all. So yeah, that was really an issue of the unregulated market, not the regulated market. And that's what the research has really shown us. So, if you regulate things, you're good to go. If you're buying from the regulated market, you're great. But, there could still be some health issues down the road. We don't know, because it's a totally new method of consumption. If you didn't know, these are e-cigarettes. Like, no real distinction. It is the same technology with a cannabis oil inside instead of a tobacco oil. So in terms of regulations that would affect e-cigarettes could also possibly affect cannabis vaping technology if it's regulated based off the technology rather than what it is used for. So different states are regulating things in different ways. And I've seen some legislation proposed that talks about e-cigarettes and doesn't necessarily distinguish cannabis devices. So that's the kind of stuff the cannabis operators should watch out for. E-cigarette regulations could possibly impact them as well, because these are functionally the exact same device with a different oil inside. So, just be mindful of that, operators.
That's right. And, it's funny, and I talk to medical professionals, and on Mondays when we do this live show, it's Medicinal Mondays. So we talk to registered nurses, we talk to cannabis certified doctors, integrative medicine doctors, that sort of thing. And pretty much every one of them says you shouldn't be ingesting vapor from an oil. It just doesn't make sense.
Exactly. That, I mean, it's kind of unanimous across the board. I believe it was Dr. Jeff Raber was speaking at the, oh God, I'm forgetting which conference it was. There have been so many, but
not anymore.
Yeah, it's true. This was in the before times.
Right.
Dr. Raber was talking at a conference, and he mentioned just the concern of oils being ingested in the lungs. And he's not the only one. Virtually all the MDs I've spoken to are like, your lungs aren't really designed to process oil. And that's where the whole lipid pneumonia thing comes from. It's not what the lungs were designed for, and problems can arise by getting oil in there. And we don't have and that's where I was kind of going with the e-cigarette point, because these are e-cigarettes. Of course, big tobacco hasn't funded any research on that. They've blocked any attempt to research the safety of these devices. So now we're using devices that have no known safety profile on the device itself and putting cannabis in there, something that is also simultaneously very well researched. We have so many studies on cannabis, but at the same time, not the right kind of studies, because the government is blocking the research that we really need to do. So now we have an untested technology with a partially untested medical agent going into it. And there definitely could be negative impacts. We don't know, because we haven't done that research, because we can't do that research. So it really comes down to the federal government opening up the ability to do research. But we'll see when that happens. I'm hoping it happens under President Biden, but both Democratic and Republican presidents have fought cannabis research. So,
at this point, though, it doesn't make any, to me, that's the research drives jobs.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, stop right there. You're a lobbyist. That should be the end of the argument. Okay. I mean, no one's going to die from research. Okay. In fact, if anything, you're going to prevent habits like that could end up in death or whatever.
100%. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's just crazy to me when I hear the Republicans talking about, well, they mentioned cannabis 62 times in the COVID relief bill, more than they mentioned jobs. And I keep saying it. It's probably the third time I've said it in this show alone. It's synonymous with jobs.
At least if you're in a state with a legal industry, if they're one of those states that hasn't legalized it yet, I can get how that doesn't mean jobs for them. But for the rest of us in the majority of the country, that means jobs.
That's exactly right. And now we're up to 15, right? We got 15 legal states. 30...
Adult use, in addition to the medical. I mean, last I checked, if you include the CBD only states, there was only 2 states that didn't have some sort of cannabis legalization. Be it CBD only, which is largely not functional in a lot of places, but it's worth mentioning. Then you got your medical, then you got your adult use. Well over half the country, well over 70% of the country. It is an overwhelming consensus that we want legal weed in America. I mean, you look at any other political issue, you don't see consensus like that.
Gallup poll last week, 68% of Americans. Highest ever. And it's gone up quite a bit over the last 10 years too. It's pretty amazing. And that's because of efforts of people like yourself, obviously, who've been in the trenches for a long time. Not as long as Steve, obviously.
Absolutely.
But I think his story is just fascinating in so many ways. And I'm so glad that I was able to get to meet him and interview him.
One of my big talking points, having been around this since before it was an industry, is, there's different waves of legalization. The first people we really have to thank are the veterans, the people who were growing weed back in the 60s for all kinds of different reasons. Largely it was vets coming back from Vietnam with PTSD, and they were self-medicating. They didn't know how the science worked yet, but it helped. There was also part of the Back to the Land movement, and those people started going to jail because they were growing a plant. That gave rise to the early activists. Those activists were like, no one should go to jail for growing a plant. This is ridiculous. From those activists, we got legalization. Thanks to legalization, we now have another wave of industrialization. The industry is here, we have capital, and it's evolved again. But every wave builds on the work of those before it, and we have to give thanks to those who came before us, and also those who are going to take the torch from us after we're done working on it.
Yeah. And it is amazing that my son, I have a 30-year-old son, that he's growing up in an era where it's accepted.
Absolutely.
It's just amazing to me after all these years of fighting it and having to deal with all that. Where do you want to see over the next 6 months with President-elect Joe Biden? First of all, I think we both want to see him actually start getting access to some of those daily briefings. I'm going out on a limb that you
Yeah.
feel the
Oh,
same
yeah.
way, right?
I mean, I would just love to see a return to normalcy, which means one party conceding when they obviously have lost. But, I'm remembering the history of Bush versus Gore. That took 36 days to figure out. So I'm buckled in for at least another couple weeks, month of this.
And meanwhile, the government isn't really working really well right now. It's all under executive decisions, and that's a
No.
scary thought. I just throw that out
It is,
there.
but the good news is there's still efforts of the state government. Like what I was doing out in Colorado has manifested in tangible progress. You can now legally recycle marijuana consumer waste for the first time out there since legalization 10 years ago. And it's a huge change. And I just want to, I know we're getting to the end, so I just want to mention I have a panel that's being voted on right now for South by Southwest. Voting's only open until this Friday, the 20th. And it's all about how we can create a circular economy for the cannabis industry, start using our waste products to make new products. So if you want to find that, if you want to give us a vote, Google South by Southwest panel picker, and using the panel picker search for higher purpose. My panel, higher purpose, create a circular cannabis economy. It's going to be your top search. Please give us an upvote before this Friday, the 20th, and you can hear from me, government regulators, and all kinds of other industry experts talking about the practical solutions we have right now to start cutting down our waste and using that for new products and actually confront climate change before it's too late.
Kind of gives new meaning to the term "let's get wasted."
I love that. I hadn't even thought of that. Thank you.
That's
We have to use that,
because I'm
Jimmy.
old. That's because I'm way older than you. Okay.
You're wiser than me.
Oh yeah, much wiser. I'm sure. I'm going to throw out my disposable vapes right after this interview. All right. So I don't know
I
how
mean, I
wise
wouldn't say throw them out. Everything in moderation. Everything in moderation.
Exactly. And I say use it responsibly. The
Absolutely.
amazing thing about the vapes is most people, in fact, I go back to my first experience with my medical card, going to the first dispensary and saying, look, you know what? I'm not sure I want to smoke it anymore. What are my other options, right? And you walk
Exactly.
out of there with an edible, and you walk out of there with maybe, a vape pen
Tincture,
or whatever.
vape pen, patches, topicals. There's a lot of different options out there that you can explore that aren't smoked.
That's right. And, you think that the vape was going to be safer, but it's interesting to me. It's fascinating in so many
And
ways.
like I said, we don't know. We don't know it's not safe. We don't know it's safe. We just, we can't do the research.
But every doctor I talk to about the smoking of cannabis there's no real research that's out there that's available anyway that says, it's as dangerous as cigarette smoke. It is not.
Absolutely. We know it's safer. Donald Tashkin, UCLA, did a study several years ago, and he's done other studies showing that cannabis smokers have less lung cancer than non-smokers.
Exactly right. Exactly right. That I've heard that. I've seen that. I totally understand that. So it's kind of like, go back to old school, like you said, right?
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I'm pretty sure still more people consume it through smoking with flour, using flour, than any other form, even though the edibles are going up and concentrates and people are cooking it now and doing the
As I recall, it's
decarboxylation
not
thing.
necessarily a majority of the market anymore, but it's still mid-upper 40%. But in some states like California, vaping is up to, I believe, 30% of sales. I know it was at least before the EVALI epidemic, and things kind of dropped off. But vaping, I think over time might surpass smoking, especially nationally, because a lot of states on the East Coast, they've legalized smoke only.
Right. There you go.
If you're not able to smoke, I guess you're going to vape.
That's right. Mitchell, one more plug. Tell us where they can go to give you a thumbs up on your panel.
Yeah, so that's going to be South by Southwest panel picker. Search for higher purpose, and my panel, higher purpose, create a circular cannabis economy. It's going to be the top choice. You need a South by Southwest account. They're very quick and easy to sign up for, and just toss us an upvote, leave us a comment if you like the idea. And thank you so much for your time today, Jimmy. Appreciate it.
Are you kidding me? Anytime. And Oaksterdam University, it must be a great class you teach. What's the name of the class?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I teach various classes there. I recently did a part of a bud tender training curriculum. So if you're a bud tender and you want to get a nice standardized training from Oaksterdam, we have that available online. I've also done a class on methods of ingestion. So just talking about the different methods of delivery and product types out there.
There you go. Well, that is Mitchell Colbert. thank you so much for
Absolutely.
joining us. Had a great conversation with you. I'd love to continue this.
Me too.
And you've got a friend on the East Coast now. So anytime you
Awesome.
want to get back to the East, you know where to find me too.
Sounds good. Well,
All right,
you have a great day, Jimmy.
Thank you very much, Mitchell. And of
See you
course,
next time.
you bet. We still have one more instructor to go from Oaksterdam University. That's right. Mickey Norris is going to join us in just a few minutes.
Oh,
We're going
she's
to take
wonderful.
a break. I'm
She's
psyched.
wonderful.
You guys, I mean, it's almost like I should be working with Oaksterdam because I keep talking to everybody there, but it's great stuff. Keep it up, and we'll have more of Cannabis Chat after this.
Awesome.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young, in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 billion in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro cannabis story.
And I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Mark and the Green Nurse Podcast. We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the network.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hey, Welcome back to the final half hour of Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday afternoon. You know, we continuously talk about this as an education day where we talk to educators. We were originally calling it Professor Weed Wednesdays and now perhaps Cannabis University. I haven't been able to access our chat room to see if anybody has chimed in on what they prefer, if anything at all. But we continue to unearth great people to talk to through this Oaksterdam University connection that we've been able to make. And that is the oldest online university for cannabis education. And joining us now is Mickey Norris, who is also involved with Oaksterdam, if I remember correctly. Is that accurate, Mickey? Do you teach there too?
Yeah, I'm an instructor in advocacy there, given all my long history of advocacy in this space.
There you go. And there's been a long history of advocacy for you because you and your life partner, Chris Conrad, met at a Solidarity Day in 1981. Can you talk me through a little bit about how that all evolved and how you first got introduced to cannabis?
Well, I first got introduced to cannabis, I think, in 1969, actually, by my cousin in Michigan. But at that time, I was too afraid to even inhale. I was like Bill Clinton. I didn't inhale. I thought I'd lose my mind if I tried it. And so they introduced me, though, and he was a cool cousin because he was in a band at that time. But then in 1970, I tried it and actually did inhale and realized, oh, this is kind of fun. But so I was kind of a casual user for the next decade. And then in 81, I met my future husband, Chris Conrad, it was a Solidarity Day rally against the new President Reagan. And at that time, I knew I wanted to get back into some political activism. I had been involved in the protesting against Vietnam and the war there. And then I started getting a little more involved in some of the politics that the U.S. was involved with CSPES Committee in Solidarity with the people of El Salvador. And I had just come back from Europe, and I had been hanging out with this German radical guy, and he made me feel very guilty for not being that active in politics. And I felt like I had a responsibility, in my own country to get active and see what I could do. So Chris happened to be sitting behind me at the rally, and we met, and then we went to another rally the next week, an anti-nuclear rally. And then, we were somewhat activistic at that point, but it wasn't until 1988 when Chris had been working on a political campaign, and George Bush the first had just been elected, and he was outside celebrating, smoking a joint with people, and they said, hey, we're the winners. We should be inside smoking. And so he said, I think I'm going to work on legalizing it. And then people thought he was nuts. They thought your reputation will be ruined. This was 1988. The drug war was amping up. There was just say no, zero tolerance. And people were very much in the closet and very much afraid to do anything at that point. And support for legalization at that point was probably in the upper 20 percentile at that point. Right. But Chris determined that he wanted to do something about it. And so we started looking into it and researching about why cannabis became illegal, thanks to a niece at a Thanksgiving at dinner. Well, after a Thanksgiving dinner when we were outside in the garage smoking a joint. And she said, well, she had learned in DARE that marijuana was bad. And so she said, well, if it's not so bad, why was it illegal in the first place? So Chris started looking into it. And after he looked into it, we found all this information on the many uses of the plant, the hemp plant, how it became illegal in the first place. And that led us into a whole other part of our lives.
Yeah. And you're now, people call you the power couple of pot, which I think that's a compliment. I like the idea of just being a couple more than anything else, because that always is a challenge, no matter what stage you're in. And I give you guys a lot of credit. Now, just for the record, 1971 was the first year I was 14, and I tried cannabis for the first time, and I did inhale the first time. And I preferred it to alcohol because, as I find out later in life, the reason why I would be getting sick on 3 beers is I'm allergic to hops. And everybody used to make fun of me because I couldn't hold my beer. And, who knows? Look, we didn't know what ADHD was in the 70s. We didn't understand food allergies as much in the 70s. You know what I mean? So it was a completely different time then. But look at where we are now, Mickey. Okay. And cannabis is literally in the middle of our political divide. It's in the middle of our consciousness. And yet we have 15 states now that have legalized it. It's amazing to me that, and then the Gallup poll that comes out last week with 68% of Americans favoring legalization. I pinch myself. I can't believe I lived to see this day. And you too have experienced this whole cycle of use in your whole life, right?
Right. We came from, like I said, in 1988. It was so severe. The penalties were very severe. People were getting sentenced to 5, 10, 20-year life sentences for marijuana. We knew people who were sitting in jail for a joint for years and years and years. But and now it's deemed essential. Right. During COVID-19, it's gone from highly prohibited to very much loved and deemed essential and to our well-being and now our economies as well, as people are looking for new ways and new revenue streams and this and that. But that's also why we got into it in the first place too. We saw, at the end of the Reagan era, the economy was real important. So we knew that marijuana could bring jobs and, prosperity, help the environment, address the social justice issues and civil rights and things like that. And it checked a lot of the boxes that we were interested in working on. And it has all those components. So it became very much a passion of ours to get involved in this. But yes, we have come a really long way. And now I take issue to the political divide. I mean, it is even one in Mississippi and South Dakota in this last election.
Right.
So there, it's now cross. Yes, Democrats are much more in favor of legalization, but Republicans are starting to come on board. They recognize the many uses of it and the benefits of it for their health and well-being as well, and they want it. And people are knowing that the drug war has failed. We're in a new time as well with the reckoning of the social justice and racial justice issues, and marijuana prohibition plays right into that whole thing. It's disproportionately, the prohibition is disproportionately targeted and impacted communities of color and arrested people of color much more strongly than the general public. And we know that if we could end the prohibition, it will do a lot towards ending the mass incarceration that we have in this country that's made the US #1 in incarceration rates in the world. And that's outrageous in the land of the free. We shouldn't be having something like that.
100%. I'm with you 100% on all those things. It was Bruce Barcott, the editor of Leafly, in his book "Weed the People," who explained how his idea that when Washington State legalized it, and he was going through his own discovery and recognized through conversations with a friend that it wasn't a drug issue, it was a civil rights issue, and that law enforcement for years have profiled persons of color. They know that they're probably carrying a couple of joints, and then they filled the jails with them. So racism right in the middle of all of this. And yet there's a way out now, Mickey. I mean, you have to look at the end of the tunnel and say, holy mackerel, there's a chance that this could be federally legalized. We could open up the banking community. We can build jobs. We can take the local tax money that is being generated in Colorado and Michigan and, well, excuse me, even Massachusetts now that has 1 billion in sales, and actually impact programs at local communities that are hurting for cash right now. It's amazing how the stars have aligned a little bit. And I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was very naive in the beginning. Chris originally made a 5-year plan, and we thought, oh, just educate enough people about all the uses of the cannabis plant, the industrial uses that could help the environment and save trees and create housing and clothes and food and different things. And marijuana for medical purposes would help address a whole bunch of different medical conditions. And then there's the civil rights thing. But we thought the truth will set us free once we educate enough people. That was, 1989. We really implemented this plan and started our public education campaign to let people know about all these different aspects of cannabis and why it should be legal. But I was surprised that it took in California till 2016 to actually pass Prop 64. And that was 28 years later, not the 5 years. And we did this other project in between called Human Rights in the Drug War, where in 1995, it was the 50th anniversary of the United Nations. And we were starting to see marijuana prisoners as prisoners of conscience, that it was just because of how we wanted to think or use marijuana that people were being incarcerated for that, arrested and incarcerated. And so we created this photo exhibit of the prisoners of the drug war and had about 100 photos. This was all drugs, not just marijuana at the time, and showed how we were in violation of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights for the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, considering that the U.S. was always pointing our fingers at other countries for their human rights problems. And that was a big education to me, and it woke me up to a whole other level of this issue. And we called it Human Rights 95, thinking like, okay, if people just saw how long people are sentenced to prison for, how their lives are shattered and destroyed, and our Constitution is being subverted by the drug war, we thought, okay, that'll end it. And a couple of years later, we had to change the name from Human Rights 95 to Human Rights in the Drug War, because we saw that, change just doesn't happen that quickly. So especially social justice. We're still fighting racial injustice and civil rights on that level, and women's rights and all these other social justice. And I came to learn, yes, ultimately we're going to, we make progress. We do a lot that we can, and we certainly are moving the ball down the field, but we will be passing the baton to the next generation as things go on. And that's why it's so important to educate people and for new people and young people to get involved in this issue as well.
What are some of the lessons that California learned? And even during the last few years with REC, they've had a ton of issues with social equity. There's tons of lawsuits going on in California. But what are some of the lessons that California has learned that we can share with some of the newer states that have just legalized it, or like Massachusetts? I mean, we're 4 years into our adult use program here, and they still only have, I believe it's 3 dispensaries in the city of
Oh,
Boston.
that's sad. I think the lessons that we learned here is don't overtax and don't overregulate. I mean, it's just going to perpetuate the illicit market. And the illicit market is still going pretty strong in California, despite the fact that we do have hundreds of dispensaries all over the place. But there's also a lot of illegal ones because the prices are cheaper there, because we are taxing too high. And I think some of the lawmakers are starting to recognize that, because every year they are starting to increase it a bit more. But they know that it's counterproductive, that if we could lower the taxes, we could bring in more revenue ultimately and take it away from the illicit market. And the overregulation has impeded a lot of people from who are traditionally in the market from entering into a legal business. It's just very cumbersome, requires a lot of money, and so we don't get too crazy with that. And then the local control. We made it so that we could have the local governments and jurisdictions are able to determine whether or not they want to allow businesses. They have to allow people to grow and consume all over the state, but they get to determine whether or not they want to allow businesses there. And I think that's also created the perpetuation of an illicit market, that, when they're banning it there. But they're starting to come around more and more as they see other communities are enjoying the benefits of the tax revenues, and that the illicit market is still continuing. The other thing, I think we need to allow cannabis consumers places to consume it legally. And we're starting to come upon some problems these days with the anti-smoking ordinances, especially in multi-dwelling residences, like apartment buildings, where they say nobody can smoke anywhere even in the privacy of their home. So that's still like a prohibition. And there's no other alternatives, because we're not supposed to be smoking outside. Although we do have a provision in Prop 64, our law in California, that allows for cities and counties to license public consumption places.
Right.
But they're just not happening. And now, especially with COVID-19, nobody's doing that. So
We don't socialize anymore. We can't. We're not allowed to. We have to stay 3,000 miles apart, and talk on Zoom, as opposed to meeting at a social club somewhere and sharing this plant with people who,
I
it's a,
think
go ahead.
Go ahead. I think the other thing is that the businesses the cannabis businesses that are licensed need to start supporting more of the organizations that are working for the rights of consumers. Because if we're still subjected to drug testing that impedes our ability to get jobs or keep jobs, if we don't have places to consume, that there's that they need to protect their consumer base so that they could sell the products to us that we want to be using. So we need more support that way too.
Yeah, I think that we may see that. I don't know if we'll see it in our lifetime, but I do expect at some point to open up some social clubs. And I believe there was one that opened in California. They are talking about, it's in the law that was written in Massachusetts and passed, but they haven't quite figured out. And again, because of COVID now, they put that on the back burner. Believe me, anything they can do to delay the rollout of this industry in Massachusetts, they're doing a great job at slowing it down. And I think that was the edict of the leadership of this state, the governor. Charlie Baker. And even though he deemed medicinal cannabis as essential during COVID, he did shut down adult use recreational dispensaries, and including the first one that had opened in Boston 3 weeks before he issued that edict. And I still to this day, I feel so bad for Pure Oasis and Kobe Evans, who's the owner there. And I just, man, you talk about a challenge to open up a business. There isn't any other industry that's had to go through what the cannabis industry has had to go through in new legal states just to get started. And you mentioned coming up with the capital to just get started. That too is a barrier to entry to so many people that have been most affected by the war on drugs. So still plenty of things to rally around and to get behind, for sure, Mickey. And I just want to know, is there anything in particular that you need to plug, or how do people get in touch with you, and how can they sign up for your course at Oaksterdam?
Well, they can go to oaksterdamuniversity.com, and they also have a free component to their advocacy program for people to learn how to advocate and for our rights, for our businesses. To me, this is like really an equal rights thing. We have a website as well that puts out information, theleafonline.com, that my husband, Chris Conrad, is the editor and publisher of. And that, I think those two avenues would be, a good way to get a hold of me. I have other projects, the Cannabis Consumers Campaign that advocates for equal rights for all cannabis consumers, for us to come out of the closet, to tell our stories, to show that we are the good people. We deserve the same rights as everybody else. We are smart, we're nice, we're intelligent, we're creative, we're hardworking. We need to dispel the myths and stereotypes around who we are. And by coming out of the closet, that will help us advocate for that. There's people will find me online as well. I'm happy to engage with people or mentor people because we have been doing this a long time. But I'd also like to plug our latest project, which is promoting cannabis spirituality, which was a surprising thing of how many people get a spiritual benefit from the use of cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
That puts us closer to nature, the universe, each other, ourselves, and gives us, this meaning in our lives. And we have a cannamaste.com. That's CANNAMASTE.com, where they could find out more about how we're trying to bring communities of cannabis consumers together to share cannabis as a sacrament, to honor her with high honor, and to recognize all the benefits and gifts that she has to bring to the planet, to human beings and everybody else.
And I love how you recognize that plant is a female plant. It took me a long time to realize that it's the female plant that dominates this cause too. And I'm a big supporter of females too, because I think for years they've never gotten an equal shake, especially in business. And I constantly apologize for my gender and my race on this show, because I can't tell you how many times and how many people I see how the white man has screwed up this country. And it's time for people like women who can step up and right the ship at this point, because we are flailing in the waters right now, and it's time to right the ship and put us all in the right direction. And I'm with you 100%, Mickey. And if there's any time you need a forum or someone just to talk to or to get the word out, please reach out to Jimmy at Pro Cannabis Media, because that's how you can get to me.
Thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate that. But as much as I refer to cannabis as a feminine pronoun, cannabis wouldn't exist actually without the male providing its seed. I mean, we do.
We're good for something.
Yeah, you're good for something. But then you could turn over the reins to the.
And that's exactly what I've been doing. So I totally understand that. And Mickey Norris, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to interviewing you and Chris at some point in the future on my podcast, In the Weeds. And I look forward to that. But appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
All right.
Namaste.
There you go. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste. There we go. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mickey. All right. Well, that's, I tell you what, we've had great interviews. We always have great interviews on this show. I'm very proud of the effort of my staff to put this whole thing together and allow me to have a 2-hour forum 3 times a week now to share some of the stories that we're able to uncover and share also my own personal journey with this incredible plant. So for Dan French, who's not here, for Isabel Turner, who's not here, who are usually keeping me company in this studio, but I got to tell you, I really love the fact that they were out there in Cyberland helping me out. So both of you did a great job as usual. And for everybody in the PCM family, I thank you for watching. Keep in mind, following this live stream, we are bringing out a episode of the Vote Pro podcast that features our friend from cannabis.net, Kurt Dalton, as a special guest. So a reminder again, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Vote Pro Podcast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Here are your hosts, Phil Adams, Jay Britton, and Andrew McCreadys.
Welcome, everybody, to another fun-filled episode of Vote Pro Podcast. And today we have a special guest. Our colleague Andrew is out this week, and filling in for Andrew is cannabis reform advocate, founder of Cannabis.net, and co-host of Weed Talk News on Pro Cannabis Media. Welcome, everybody, Kurt Dalton. How you doing, Kurt?
I'm doing great. I know when Seth Rogen, Tommy Chong, they're not available, you go with the next best option. That's me.
That's
You're
right.
third, baby. Third.
That's right. You're right behind Seth and Tommy.
Yep.
And Snoop.
Yeah, it's Snoop. Snoop was busy tonight too, but that's
Snoop
fourth is not bad. You know,
fourth, not bad. You're in good company.
Take what you can get.
So, how happy are you with the results of the election? Putting aside the presidential nonsense for a while, but the sweep of cannabis reform ballot initiatives.
Well, I don't have a sister, Phil, but kissing your sister isn't that much fun. So I'm a fan of the small progress at the state level. But until we see something at that federal level, MORE Act, presidential, the Senate tie going to Harris on the vote, I'm not that excited.
Okay. Now, I'm a little concerned, and I wonder what your thoughts are that in the most recently released racial equity plan put out by the Biden transition team, there's no mention of cannabis reform in it anywhere. Does that give you pause at all?
No, I actually came up on the show earlier today too, and I just think people are reading into it too much at this point. The fact that the Democrats are pushing the MORE vote in December for a tactical reason tells me it's front and center. And the fact it wasn't mentioned yet as a president-elect doesn't concern me because his VP is one of the major co-sponsors. So he'd be hard-pressed to backpedal on this one, I think.
Well, you may be right about that. I think that's right. So let's just for our viewers and listeners. Well, we got a lot more listeners than viewers. I mean, a lot more.
That's going to change now that
But for those who are tuning in, listening, and otherwise partaking in Vote Pro podcast, tell us a little bit about how you got involved with cannabis advocacy, cannabis.net, etc.
So yeah, it was probably about 2015 that this URL, cannabis.net, an exact match domain, came up at auction. And I was really shocked that at this point in time, someone would actually, put that up for sale with what I thought was going to happen in 2016. So I got the URL, I started to build it out. I knew that the guys over at Weed Maps had the other 3 exact match domains. So marijuana.com and net and cannabis.com they bought.
Okay.
So I knew, there was going to be advertising in this niche. So I tried to build out a platform for advocacy, but something that people could come back to, not just the standard publish an article and send it out there. So we have a full social network for people to interact, ask questions about growing, post pictures. We do a lot of content, both on the text and video side. We got our apps in early to Google and Apple, kind of got the grandfathered in there. We also created a CBD store with the hopes of moving to THC when the right time came and the right license. We have full mapping as well. So we give people, at least in North America, a chance to find all cannabis businesses around you, whether it be all the way from an MMJ doctor to a lawyer to an edible maker or just to someone who's an advocate could be on our map for free. And, you land in Chicago, you want to kind of see what the scene looks like. You can just pull it up on your phone.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love the strains tab.
Yeah, so we added, that was actually a user request. We had it on the website, a full strain guide, kind of seeing the future of this looks like the wine industry as far as typing in something. Right. What does Blue Dream do? Or what can I do for anxiety?
Right.
And I actually had a user say, why don't you add that to your app? Because it'd be really cool to pull it up in a store. And we actually did. So, we had a full strain guide as well. And
the cool thing is, for people checking it out, you go to that strain tab. Not only does it give you a list of how many strains do you have on there. My God,
I think like 130 right now.
Yeah, wow. So you can pick a strain, and then people rate it, and they, they're right in there. Oh, this is great for sleep, or this really helped with my anxiety, or this got me high as shit, or whatever. It is really interesting and helpful. It's great.
So it's kind of user generated in that sense.
Yeah, people can leave their reviews and their content as far as what they thought of it. And we do have the weed emojis, which are popular on shirts and stuff. We developed a whole line of basically weed cartoon figures to represent the anxiety or the non-sleep or the dry eyes. And we put them on T-shirts and keychains and stuff. So it's kind of a side gig, ancillary. We like to call it ancillary, Phil.
Well, it's obvious a lot of thought and a lot of energy went into that site and developing, because in my mind, and doing this show, we spend a lot of time on cannabis websites.
Yeah,
researching, finding
it's
articles.
One of the best, if not the best one out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's and the writers you have, I don't know where you find these, but there's some really great articles. It's not just dry, statistical stuff. There's a lot of commentary and editorialization stuff, and it's really great site. I recommend it highly.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we try to keep it. I once described it, I think, on as kind of a National Lampoon meets Barstool Sports meets weekly or recaps, because you don't just want to repurpose everything. So we try to get the opinion pieces. We try to get something that's interesting, whether it's an interview or somebody putting something out there and having a discussion. We can get away with some stuff that maybe some other sites can't, as far as, with making someone laugh or going a little over the line. So we enjoy it.
I like that about it. There's some comedy in there. There's some lighthearted stuff, which is why it's my favorite site to go to.
Yeah, me too. It's not just like Jay said, not just the dry, just the facts, man.
Yeah, facts, just the facts. Well, getting back to Phil's question, let me ask you, with the how the Democrats have really narrowed their lead in the House, and who knows what's going to happen in the Senate, but it looks likely that the Republicans will hold on. Is anything really going to change in the next couple of years?
Oh, I see. I am the outlier on this. I think it's going to happen fast as lightning. I am not the guy who thinks Biden's history and Kamala's history are going to, they're really not into it. It's all about money. You guys know that in DC. It's all about tax revenue. We happen to be coming out of a massive COVID recession. Everybody's broke. The unemployment coffers are broke. So I'm on the other end of this spectrum. I think this move by the Democrats in December to get this vote in for maybe what reasons we don't all understand. But then with the transition, I think this is the opposite. This is going to happen extremely quickly. If the Senate ties and Harris is the deciding vote, or, let's just shoot for the home run where the Senate goes Democratic, I think it's done in the first 120 days. It's going to happen fast.
So if the Senate doesn't go Democratic, if the GOP holds on, and
what's Mitch going to do?
It's pretty close, but it's looking like a very distinct possibility. Still fast, you think? You think they're going to find a way to ram it through the the Grim Reaper, Mitch McConnell?
So this is why I think they're doing it in December, to put the Republicans on notice, and the Republicans in legalized states that are collecting tax revenue and have this new Gallup poll at 70%, 68%. I think they're putting it on notice to the voters, and they're calling the Republican bluff in the sense, are they really going to veto this one? I mean, they have healthcare to worry about. They have higher tax rates coming. They have this redistricting and U.S. Senate stuff. Census stuff to worry about. Are the Republicans really going to stop this one? Like, are you really going to fire a shot and use some of your ammo? And that might be why the Democrats are getting the December vote in and trying to get this through. And there's a lot of great stuff in the MORE Act, too, about doctors being able to prescribe it for veterans without the veterans losing their benefits finally. So it's not just about removing it from the Controlled Substance Act. There's a lot of things in there, expungement, some social equity, some economic empowerment factors. It's not just let's make weed legal and walk away.
Right.
Yeah, I was real surprised to see that they're voting on that in December. I just saw it and I thought, wow, that seems.
Well, walk through it, Jay, right? What's the reasoning for the Democrats to do that? Lame duck Congress, 3 weeks before a new president is most likely, sworn in. Right. There's got to be a method to that madness. This isn't just, we got nothing to do on Christmas Day, that kind of thing.
Right.
Oh, no, this is all very calculated. And I think you may be right. I mean, if this puts the GOP Senate on the defensive, like you say, 68-70% of Republican voters favor legalization on a federal level. So, if this puts them on notice, maybe the passage won't occur in December, but, next year could be a much different story.
Yeah, the new Gallup poll just came out, and they're 68.5% now for adult use.
And you're looking at 38 or 39 states collecting tax revenue, at least from a medical program. There's a lot of Republicans that represent those states too, and they need money and jobs. They might have to hold their nose and vote for it or not veto it. But you're going to come into office and not create jobs and tax revenue, and the voters want it. Come on,
and the voters want it. More to the point, and also it's the expungement part of this that is really near and dear to my heart. And that's why I think they were hoping to see more of this in the racial equity plan, because this is such a racial equity issue, as we know, that these people are getting put away for long jail terms. Jay, you had a story about someone in Alabama.
I do. I have a story I read today, and this is will make you. I've been doing these last couple of weeks, stories that piss you off. Here's one for you. This is a veteran named Sean Worsley. If you're familiar with him or not, you probably read it. So this guy was just released from jail. He spent almost 10 months in jail. He was sentenced to 5 years. And here's his story. He had a medical card in Arizona being treated for PTSD. And he also had a severe brain injury. And I think he was in Afghanistan, if I remember correctly. So the guy's driving. He went to Arizona to visit family or something. They stopped at a gas station. And he's a black gentleman, and this white Alabama cop, this is where he was in Alabama, pulled him over, said his music was too loud in his car, got him out of the car, thought he might smell a trace of cannabis. So he searched the car, and they found a little bit of weed. The guys, and Sean, who was being arrested with his wife, by the way, said, listen, I officer, I have a card. He said, well, that doesn't do you any good here in Alabama. He could have given him, he could have charged him with a misdemeanor and whatever.
But no.
They hit him with the books, man. And this guy got a 5-year sentence. Luckily, he's out now. But it gets back to what Kurt was saying about the MORE Act having stuff in there for veterans. I mean, that's such a huge part of this, and the expungement thing. So long story short, people heard about it. The press got hold of it. And, he was eventually pardoned and let go. But the guy spent almost a year in prison for having a little bit of weed, which was legal in his state, home state. So I just think this hits home the whole, and I got to say right here, lastprisonerproject.org, check it out. That's the
Yeah,
place to go because they're doing
D'Angelo
great
does a
work.
great. We did a big story on Sean, and even the bust itself was a little shady. He was playing air guitar, listening to music. Now, he has a head injury. He may not be what he was before, and he was going to help his grandmother move. His grandmother was moving.
That's
he was going
what
to
it
move
was.
furniture. He drove across, the states to get there. No business whatsoever. And this is why it needs to change.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And do you know anything about the Safe Harbor Act? I think that was introduced, I think it was February 2019.
Is that for the banking? Is that Steve's?
No, this is a veterans Safe Harbor Act, and it has to do. It's a bill essentially that secures veterans the right to possess and transport cannabis for medical reasons if they have a card in their state. And we don't even need that if we can get the MORE Act passed and move along with those other bigger issues. That doesn't matter. But again, that just sat and languished in the Senate. In fact, it never made it out of committee as far as I know. But anyway, I didn't. That's again, the veterans is a huge part of this whole thing, don't you think, Kurt?
It is. And you've seen the specials on different, HBOs and shows where they show you the amount of drugs the government will give veterans for part of their benefits for PTSD. I mean, it's literally the size of a suitcase they get every month of pills. And these guys just want to use cannabis, and it helps their anxiety.
Well, because it works.
And you just wonder why, this is okay to take this suitcase full of pills that will send you every month the rest of your life, but don't touch the plant. It makes no sense. It's time for a change.
Yeah, we're preaching to the choir. We all agree. And I think most people agree. I mean, let's face it. At this point, 70% of Americans agree and almost 100% on the medical issue, right? So I think it comes down to in this case, with Kurt saying that this is going to happen quickly, if there's anything that's going to push this, it's the economics. The situation that states like Texas and others. I mean, Texas introduced 9 bills this week, for different types of legalization bills.
Right.
And it's all going back to the fact that COVID has shut the state down and they're out of money. And they're look at these states making literally $1 billion. Tax revenues are through the roof in legal states. So do you think that's going to be a big part of what keeps the ball rolling and makes it happen quickly?
I was going to say, you took the words right out of my mouth. Like, would it be interesting to look back in 36 months and say, cannabis is legalized, it's removed. Did COVID spur that by a few years? Did the COVID crisis, due to economics, regardless how the three of us feel about the plan and what should be done, did the economics alone force the hand of legalization? And we'll look back maybe a generation from now or 10 years and say, boy, if that COVID thing didn't hit, would Trump still be in office? My argument is Trump's in office without COVID. I mean, the stock market's at 30,000, unemployment was 2.5%. Assuming that didn't change, I don't think Joe Biden's our president. So did COVID?
No, I think Trump wins in a walk. And so if it has that effect on the national politics, then surely we could possibly tie that to cannabis legalization in such time as it eventually does occur, that it moved up the calendar.
Yeah, it got the president who didn't like cannabis out due to the economic implications and how he handled it. And it moved up cannabis because of the strong growth during the crisis, the job creation, and we need tax revenue. So we may look back in, 3 years and 10 years and say, wow, COVID really helped cannabis legalization in multiple ways.
Well, the question that comes to my mind, though, is let's presume the Republicans hold the Senate, which is, I think, better than 50% right now, possibility. What's Mitch going to do?
Great question. Mitch, the hemp farmer, who's got we actually just put up why is Kentucky cannabis so good this week on our website from a Kentucky farmer wrote it.
Yes, I read that. That's a great article.
But does Mitch, can you ignore it's all about money, right? So we're a very slanted podcast. We're Vote Pro Pod, upcannabis.net. But in the end, how many Kentucky people get jobs? How do we refill the state coffers? And, the fact his state has some of the best cannabis in America historically, as Bill Murray and Caddyshack will point out. Does Mitch, but again, does he fire his ammo on this?
So they got that going for him, which is nice.
Yeah, but Kurt, the question is not whether, the residents of Kentucky would vote for an initiative that they could do so. The question is whether Mitch will let it get to the floor for a vote.
For a federal legalization.
Right.
All right, so let me turn it over to you guys. What would have to happen? Because I think Mitch sees this more as, I don't want to do anything nice for the Democrats and help them. So what would have to be in Mitch's pocket, no pun intended, for him to allow this to go through?
It's hard for me to say, Kurt, because I'm really not convinced of what it is in Mitch's mind that's holding this up. He's not just holding this up. He's holding up
Everything up. That's
lot
right.
of legislation. He calls himself the Grim Reaper because, and traditionally the Senate has been the place where everything slows down and is deliberated and considered. The passions run high in the White House. They run high in the House of Representatives. They call the Senate is the saucer where you cool the tea. And he takes that seriously. Is it just a matter of that? Or does he have some bug up his ass regarding cannabis in particular? I don't know one way or the other whether he does or he doesn't. If it is the latter, then I don't see this getting past Mitch anytime soon. If it's just simply a matter of, Senate, slowing things down and deliberating, it has a chance.
I don't think the Senate would have enough votes if Biden signed on, right? They'd have to veto it. I mean, if he signed on, you'd have to have a Senate. What is it, a supermajority? So maybe Biden gets on from his own party's House push, signs it, and dares the Republicans. I don't think they even have a supermajority to stop it. And maybe that's a message to
well, it's got to get to the president first, and it can't get to the president until it gets past the Senate.
All right.
So they can deliberate all they want to in the House, and they can pass anything they want to in the House, but it doesn't get put up for a signature, either to veto or not. It doesn't go to his desk, period, unless there is a floor vote on the Senate and it passes. So he could be the roadblock here. Now, there are other indications that say that the Senate is not as anti-cannabis as one might expect. For example, there was a bunch of rules issued from the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, and the Senate Appropriations Committee issued a report that was critical of those rules regarding marijuana and hemp. For example, there was a rule that forces hemp growers to destroy their entire crop if they are tested and exceed, 0.5% THC. 0.3% is technically the threshold between hemp and marijuana. But if it's above 0.5%, they have to, destroy their whole crop. Well, the Senate Appropriations Committee called that threshold arbitrary and urged the USDA to reconsider it. There are other provisions that are just creating unnecessary roadblocks for farmers to get their hemp to market and legal cannabis to market that the Senate Appropriations Committee took issue with. So what does that tell us about their predilection as far as or their position regarding hemp and marijuana? I don't know. I don't know exactly what to read into that, but it makes me wonder if the roadblock isn't necessarily, or the logjam isn't necessarily as tough in the Senate as it's made out to be. I guess time will tell.
I think, if you take we were talking about Steve D'Angelo earlier, he's always said, the president can call and order the DEA to remove it from the Controlled Substance Act. Now,
anytime he wants to.
Right. So, we don't have Bernie Sanders in there, so I wouldn't anticipate that day one. But what if Biden, they want to go around it? What if the Harris and the Democrats are just putting enough pressure where they're saying, look, we'll do it one way or the other. If McConnell wants to do this, make the call, Joe, and let's see what he does. I mean, there's ways around it, but now we go back to, Joe Biden's history says he's not really a big fan and he's always been against it. But I'm telling you, money talks, and politicians need the money and they need the votes. And, maybe with Mitch being from Kentucky is a blessing in disguise. He might be playing with fire. Yes, he just got reelected. He's very powerful, but he's also got a lot of farmers down there that would like to make money as well and cross a state line and do some business.
Yeah.
Not to mention the business folks in the industry, knowing that how much tax revenue that would pull into the state. I mean, he could be getting a lot of pressure from all angles. And the stigma is going away because so many states have legalized now. I mean, we're talking about states like Mississippi and, South Dakota and places where you just really wouldn't have expected it a few years ago. So maybe that helps ease.
I think the latest numbers from New Frontier were like 71% of Americans have access to some form of legal through a card. In the worst case, 30% have access to recreational as far as population wise. So at some point, what are we up to 38 states? There's only 12 that don't have it. I mean, at some point we're it's the opposite. What are we doing with these 12 states? So
right. Yeah. Idaho and where, Kansas and few left that are holdouts. And the funny thing, and one of the things you look at with some of those states is they're getting in a position where they're surrounded by legal states because so many states are legal now. So how do you police that?
I mean, that's huge pressure.
So they're watching their neighbors just put money in the bank. Well,
that happened with New York. That's why in Massachusetts, if you look, all the people are over here on the ocean, and all the not all of them, but a lot of dispensaries are over here on the New York border where there's no people. There's a reason for that. Yeah. And of course, New Jersey is going to force New York. Look at Cuomo, right? He's going to we got to get this done tomorrow because we're not letting all that money go to New Jersey. And now Pennsylvania's got it. So guess what? New York's not going to sit there who needs tax revenue. There's a lot of pressure. That happened with Colorado. Remember that when they went and all these states filed lawsuits and the judge threw them out and then they had to legalize.
And like you said, in some of these states, you see all the dispensaries on the borders,
you just have to go over the state line.
Right.
So what is the holdup in New York? Why hasn't this passed up until now?
I think it's because, Cuomo had put it on the table and then kind of they yanked it back. And obviously election and I think voter, how he's feeling the temperature. But I think New Jersey's the kicker. New Jersey and Pennsylvania. There's no way New Yorkers are going to let the New Jerseyans, get all that money tax revenue. That's never going to happen. Never going to happen in New York.
And New York is hurting more than most states as far as revenue because people are leaving in droves. And people with lots of money are leaving. So they got to make up that shortfall some kind of way.
Well, they see Biden's tax plan, they're really going to leave. So, New York's going to do this fast, as well as the California tax, as 50 Cent pointed out.
That's right.
Because I saw
he
the
doesn't want
tax
to be
rate,
25 cents, right? Hey,
he doesn't want to be 25 cents.
I got a question for you, Kurt. What's your stance on the word marijuana? I noticed on your website, it's rare to see that word used. And we've had this discussion. We asked Steve D'Angelo about it when he was on.
Well, and I asked Jimmy about it. He didn't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, we're older guys. We're in our 60s. So we grew up in a different generation than you, I would say. And that's what we called it, marijuana. And so I find myself using the word all the time on the show. But I noticed on your website it's rare. So how do you feel about it?
I'm a little partial to that word cannabis. I'd love to see the world turn to that cannabis.
I try to use it. Phil does. We try to use cannabis whenever we can. But I mean, even when you read articles, right, Phil? Right. They use the word marijuana all the time.
All the time. Well, because it's just kind of an established name. But there's there's a long history to that name, and there are racial overtones to that name that I don't particularly like. And plus, whenever I think of the word marijuana, I think of, Jeff Sessions, marijuana, good people don't smoke marijuana,
Yeah.
So we have a couple articles up about that and the history of it. And when we put them up, the response from our Facebook page, when we even put there, is marijuana a racist term? Pretty good question. Here's read the history. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You guys, I'm going to unfollow you. I can't believe it even says it's so crap. And my feeling, to get to your question, is it is not a racist term in origin. It was made a racist term by the U.S. government in the 1940s and leading into the 50s. They used that word and, made it a dirty word the way they used it. So the origin itself, not racist. The development in society and as humans and what the U.S. government propaganda did to it, it is considered a racist term.
Fair enough. That makes more sense. Yeah, I can see that. Because, Mexican Americans, Tejanos back, 100 years ago, they were calling it marijuana.
Yep.
But that's...
So I guess the bottom line is you do avoid the word.
I try to. I think cannabis is the correct scientific name. And I think if we're going to go down the stigma road and what people think, and, I think starting fresh, I wish they called it medical cannabis from 10 years ago when they first started this stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I
instead
just
of
think it's the right word.
MMJ.
It's a good new beginning for people who are trying it, as opposed to the stigma of weed and dope and marijuana.
Yeah, it's Cheech and Chong and Spicoli, and that's what comes to mind. You had a great article on the insurance issue. Tell us about that.
On which was it?
Insurance
for cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have one coming out tomorrow, so you must have the sneak preview.
Yep, he's got the advanced copy.
Yeah, so luckily I just went over this with Jimmy, and I guess Lloyd's of London, breaking news, is going to start insuring the crops. As I said, it's too bad they're 6 months too late for one fire season or global warming.
Right.
But at least going forward now, there'll be a legitimate underwriter for whether it's cannabis crops or cannabis, manufacturing. And that's just, part of that consolidation that we've seen is that the world is getting ready. The tornado has started and the legalization is coming. And I hope it doesn't leave the U.S. behind, because you have Mexico legalizing in the next 2 weeks. The advocates are not thrilled with the plan, but it's still legalization. So now you have Canada and Mexico. You're having a major British insurer stepping in to start doing cannabis crops.
Wow.
Hey, Mitch.
Yeah.
The world's moving without you, buddy.
Right.
Well, that's
hey, Mitch, here's the wall. Read the writing.
Now that's the breaking news, but I was talking about the health insurance article you had.
Oh yeah, so this was a great one from I think it was a health insurance quote website came out with a piece, and it caught my eye because I hadn't read anything ever about this. And it was the fact that 50% of the states that have medical cannabis, sorry about that, guys, they have 50% less health insurance shoppers and applicants. And when you kind of you think about that for a second, you're like, well, that's got to be an anomaly, right? States have a lot of people, and then some states have, South Dakota doesn't have as many. But when you think about the implications on a national level, that people, if we're going to, extrapolate that out, who use cannabis in a recreational or medical way, whether it's for anxiety, sleep, appetite, stuff like that, they're saying, you know what? I'm doing all right. I don't need that. Take away the politics of it. You have to have health insurance and the fines and all that. But they don't look for health insurance at a rate of 50% less.
That's huge.
That's ridiculous.
That's mind-boggling to the national scale of what we spend on health insurance and Medicaid, especially with seniors. They're our biggest buyers of cannabis. So if you could get the seniors, I mean, I'm not saying they can drop health insurance, but you could just see the implications that people who use cannabis, let's just say, need health insurance, they think 50% less.
That's
right.
Stop the press.
And yeah, whether it's reality or perception, there are people who are, living better through cannabis, And
especially the people that are just going to the CVS once a month, right? To get there, whether it's hypertension or their sleep. And I only use, Alestra, a little bit, those guys are just using cannabis and they're gone. It's not, if you have heart condition or serious things going on, cannabis isn't going to cure you. But if you're on those, I just have 1 or 2 prescriptions when I need it, those guys are all using cannabis and getting off health systems. So that's unbelievable.
Yeah. I remember before the pandemic started, I would go, and Jay, you had the same experience going to the, or I guess it was Andrew going into the dispensaries, sitting in the waiting room. They're all people our age.
Yeah.
They're,
shocking.
I won't call myself elderly, but
you guys got all the money. You can actually buy it. So
we can afford it. Yeah. So tell us, how did you and Jimmy hook up with Pro Cannabis Media? What's the story behind that?
I think we met at one of the Boston NCAN shows, New England Cannabis shows, and he was interviewing, I think it was Barney Frank, and I think he had Bob Lobel, who's a sportscaster, and I was doing the website. I wasn't doing much on the video side as far as being on camera. We were making kind of short videos that go with every article, more for search engine placement and kind of being in YouTube. And then we just kind of started talking about what I recognized him growing up. He was a sportscaster in Boston, so I do remember him, and he wanted to transition to this, and I already had a website with some traffic, and we just said we should do a show where we just kind of toss it back and forth like you guys do. And, now it's grown up to a big thing where it's got a Twitch channel. It's going Roku. I think he's going to do pretty close to 24-hour, footage and coverage. And he's just really seeing an opportunity in that market for education. And, from a perspective that is of a little bit of an older generation. It's not tie-dye T-shirts and bongs and all sorts of displays in front of you of the sponsors. So having educated talks with doctors and politicians and dispensary owners about the business.
I tell you, We Talk News is great, and Pro Cannabis Media is an excellent network. Everybody should really go check it out. So much content, so much information, great interviews. I mean, you guys have had everybody on there. Steve D'Angelo, and I mean, who are some of the folks you all have interviewed or Jimmy's interviewed on?
Yeah, so one of the bigger ones we did was the CEO roundtable right when COVID hit.
Yeah.
And it was Bruce Linton, Canopy. It was Joe Lasardi at that point, who's right up the street from me. Chris Walsh of MJ Biz. We were all kind of sitting around, and we just got like a four-way Zoom going and threw out what's going to happen with COVID and stuff like that.
That's a great show.
So much information. Tommy Chong on, and I'm just trying to think. He's had all sorts of people as far as regional kind of celebrities as well.
Yeah. I think Jimmy's Tommy on our show. You think we need Tommy on our show?
Yeah, we do.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's got a new dispensaries coming out, Cheech and Chong dispensaries, and he's happy to go on shows.
Yeah,
all right.
I know.
We'll give him a call.
Well, Jimmy's been on here a couple of times, and he's crazy, man. He's got some stories that are just really, really fun. You guys do an awesome job over there.
Well, one of our superstars is right here. So,
with the exception of Phil.
Don't say Phil's not part of it. He's been a regular.
That's right. Yeah, every week.
And of course, Deb Borchardt came aboard right away.
She's
I've known
great
her for a while. She does an unbelievable Wall Street report.
She sure does.
And you kind of do get that. I mean, we try to keep it at 15 minutes, but sometimes it's 20, but you just want to zip through it as opposed to kind of like, 90 minutes. I have to filter just like boom. And Jimmy really does. Like, we're going to do 18 topics. Go. So.
Yeah, well, we try to do 30, and it's hard. We always go over a little bit, but we're about there now, aren't we, Phil?
We're about there now. I just want to remind everybody that if you like the show, and especially if you like the video, first of all, go into Apple Podcasts if you like the audio and give us a 5-star rating. Tell a friend about us. Kurt, how can they get in touch with you folks over on cannabis.net?
They can just come to cannabis.net. They can fill out the contact us form. I think it's info@cannabis.net's the email at the bottom of the page. If you have any story ideas or you want to get branding, we have a decent amount of eyeballs. And, we work with Pro Cannabis Media too. So there's always opportunity to get on camera and have your brand featured in like more of a video sense and do your own pre-rolls. So as this world, needs more cannabis coverage and some of the bigger places still won't take it, it's an opportunity, whether you're into CBD or hemp, or you just want to get your company's story out there, your fundraising. We get that all the time. And we try to help everybody else. It's pretty reasonable and we're all in this together, certainly. And it's a great group of people in this industry. Probably until the sharks come in with full legalization. So it's a real, like you said, Steve D'Angelo, Tommy, really great guys, as humble as can be. You could just call them up. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, what I'm looking forward to is, with any luck, and we have some good news on the vaccine front, that this whole COVID thing may dissipate sometime over the next year. I'm looking forward to the cannabis events, trade shows and in person, face to face, press in the flesh. There's so many people out there that we've talked to that I just want to meet and sit down and chat with. And
you're one of them, Kurt.
I'm just looking. Yes, right. You and Mr. Jimmy Young. He was great. We get him on there. We just kind of like wind him up and let him go.
Yeah,
he tells these stories. Nothing to do with cannabis.
I do miss it too. And the MJ Biz show in Vegas was the Super Bowl. We got to set up a booth and get a media booth where we just do this all day. And
count us in, man.
How cool would that be to just stream for 4 or 5 hours a day?
Right. Do a live podcast from our booth.
It's like Media Row for the Super Bowl. It'll be the Weed Bowl.
Right. So how else can they get in touch with us, Jay?
You can send us an email at podcast@votepropot.com. Call our message line, 240-257-2441. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon, and you'll be updated
never miss
every
an
time
episode.
we never miss one.
Well, you guys are the Washington insiders. So what I've given you my opinion right now. $100 on the table. What do we see with cannabis legalization? Go,
Phil.
Well,
he called it for 2019. So
I thought it was going to be 2019. I would not be surprised if someone in the Biden administration, maybe Joe himself, gets on the blower to the FDA and says, take it off Schedule 1, Now, he has talked about rescheduling instead of descheduling, but I think there's going to be enormous pressure on him to do more. The folks at Normal and some of the other cannabis policy project, or marijuana policy project, rather, they're saying that rescheduling is not sufficient. And I think, I don't think Kamala Harris is all that thrilled about rescheduling. I think there's going to be ample pressure to take it off Schedule 1 and just, lose that whole. And once that happens, that's it. The game's over. I think there's nothing much more for the federal criminalization beyond taking it off Schedule 1. So that's my hope and semi prediction.
I think 2021 is the year. I really do. I feel like this is it. There's just everything's coming in line, and especially the economics of the situation with all these local jurisdictions being out of money. And politicians are always looking for a way to fill the coffers. What easier way is there than this? So I think this could be it.
If they won't see the light, make them feel the heat. I say that all the time. Too bad, if they're not going to do the right thing, at least do the smart thing.
And it's going to get, you mentioned it. There's I've been harping on this for a while, for a year or two, that when you remove that from the Controlled Substance Act, no longer a controlled substance, that removes the post office, federal office. It's now grandma's cookies. It's beef jerky.
Banking.
Right. And the Safe Banking Act.
Yeah, Safe Banking Act means you can actually put all that money in a bank and track it and hopefully get the IRS code fixed as well.
Take credit cards.
Yeah, but you're looking at, now it's going to come down to like crossing a state line on a non-controlled substance. Oof. The DEA won't be involved. The only way the FDA gets involved is you mix it with a food or a protein source.
Or,
you talk about a free-for-all like we will never see. You take away those the what could happen federally as a punishment. It is going to get wild because it's going to be off to the races.
It's a finger out of the dike if you take it off Schedule 1.
Oh, totally. And business-wise, everyone's going to push the limit. I'll guarantee that right off the bat. You think the black and gray market's aggressive now?
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? California, your fine for a first offense without a license, $10 civil fine. You know what the second offense is? Getting caught. $10. So you're wondering why guys are like on weed maps, just running a van for $50,000 a month and taking a chance. There you go.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, you pay more of that in taxes on it.
I know, California. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, Kurt. Really enjoyed it. Let's do it again, man. Let's make this a regular thing. What are you doing tomorrow night?
Yeah, I was going to say, once we get some movement on this, we might have to have a redo in December if this thing actually something happens with this vote in December that we don't see coming.
Yeah, will you come back?
Absolutely. You know where to find me.
Okay, great.
Right now.
All right. Kurt Dalton, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being a part of Vote Pro Podcast. We put a lot of stuff on the podcast, but we can't really cover everything. So we invite you to check us out on our social media platforms. Go to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn and do a search for Vote Pro Pot.